I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mike, would you like to take roll, please?
Yes. Chairperson Fox?
Here.
Commissioner Newsom? Commissioner Voigt? Commissioner Kalani?
Here.
Commissioner Grissom?
Here.
Commissioner Murphy?
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell? Here.
All right, thank you. Next up, item 4, approval of our meeting agenda.
So moved.
Support.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Kalani, a second from Commissioner Grissom. Are there any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have no meeting minutes to approve this week, so we'll pass through item 5. We now have item 6, call to the public. If you were here last week's meeting was a public hearing. There was a point after the application where the public came forward and made comments. Tonight's is just a standard or a traditional Planning Commission meeting. The public hearing piece is over for this applicant. So you have either now, or you'll notice item 9 on the agenda after the applicant, you'll have an opportunity to come up. So if there's anybody here this evening that would like to speak in regards to actually anything, please feel free to come forward now, or you'll again have an opportunity at the end. If you give us your name and address.
It's Curtis Pollock, and I live in Hartland Woods, which is not near this development.
Can we get you to come forward?
Sure.
The microphone will help those in the room and at home hear you.
I'm Kurt Pollock, and I don't live near this development, but I live in Hartland Woods, and I've been in Hartland Township for about 30 years. I found out about this by reading the Brighton Argus or the Livingston County Press, whatever it's called nowadays. And it didn't sound to me like the type of development that Hartland was looking for. If I think back 10 or 12 years ago when the Planning Commission redid the planning ordinance, they were trying to look for somewhat of a more upscale or attractive developments. I'm not sure what's going on the other side of 59. What I read was, and I apologize if the Brighton Argus got it wrong or Livingston County Press, but what I read is they want to put a 55-bed nursing home, which probably isn't financially viable anymore. And then they also want to put 2 gas stations, a Quick Pick, and some other fast food restaurants in. Just, it strikes me as this is going to look like Waterford, if you've ever been down around the Waterford area, probably at about 10 years after they developed. The other question I have is, we have a lot of developments in Hartland that haven't come to completion. And this looks to me like, if from reading in the paper, the developer is really interested in developing the commercial section along 59. Sounds like they're going to pass it off to another developer to do the housing. And I'm guessing they're asking you guys for a multiple of zonings, because this doesn't fit. This gets a special use zoning, I would think. And once you guys grant that, if they sell the land off to another developer, there's really no stopping whatever they want to put in there, as long as it falls within the residential apartment rules. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, are you guys really seriously looking at this? Or, I mean, I live near Mill Point. And this looks worse than Mill Point is as far as how densely packed it is. And they're already having sewer troubles in Mill Point. So I'm not sure if there's a correction for that before this goes in. There's a lot of ifs, and my feeling is, I don't know if the developer is really serious about finishing this, or if all they want to do, like I said earlier, is develop the corridor, then pass it off to someone else. So I don't know if there's any kind of a bond they're presenting to pay for what they don't build to make sure that we get it, or if we're just looking for sewer money. I'm not really sure what the plan is here. So that's really why I came up here today. This just doesn't look like what the Hartland planning plan was. This looks like We're just kind of settling for something.
All right, well, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yep. Anyone else?
Is this
Good evening. I think they're both working. We'll know real quick here when you speak.
Hello? You hear me?
Can
Okay.
you hear them
good.
coming through the speakers?
My name is Chris Crump, 3104 Fenton Road. Watched the meeting from home, recorded it, went over it time and time again, trying to gather my thoughts, my wife, about Hartland. So I wrote down basically what a lot of the residents I've talked to feel about this development. I can hand a copy off if you have the recording secretary, if this goes on the public record. Anyways, I have been a Hartland resident for 24 years. I'm also a state of Michigan residential builder. I'm not against responsible developments, but I strongly feel the Mayberry development has many concerns for Hartland residents. This proposed development includes single-family homes, multiple family dwellings, mixed-use, commercial, senior residence, cluster homes, and apartments, all within 108 acres. This results in an irresponsible, ultra-dense development that does not reflect the Hartland rural setting beyond the US 23 immediate area. The developer claims that this development would be an asset to Hartland residents by developing a close-knit, walkable sense of place. The developer also claims an impressive entrance to Hartland via a westbound entrance off M59 by a huge brick wall with a permanent billboard advertisement of Mayberry Homes. Other claimed assets include high-end convenience store, otherwise known in Michigan communities as a party store, planned car wash, which was stated by the Mayberry developer, quoted as the best car wash ever seen, while there are 2 car washes already established in Hartland. 2 gas stations proposed have no place in this area of the township. Setbacks off M59, Fenton Road, and Pleasant Valley would be visually troubling as an eyesore transition between rural landscapes to a development built close to the roadways. The developer also claims walkable areas, yet plans 499 residential units mixed with commercial buildings accessed by the heavy traffic on M59, making pedestrian safety a concern. Also in the commercial area, setbacks set at 0. The roadway, including roads so narrow it presents dangers to pedestrians, contrary to the developer's remarks that somehow narrow roads cause people to slow down. 10-foot spacing between homes does not reflect the rural character of Hartland, nor do more brick walls and unspecified plantings around proposed at M59 entrances and narrow 20-foot screens as natural areas dividing certain zones. The developer proposes duplexes, apartments, and cluster homes with little or minimal driveways that would not adequately park 2 vehicles per household without infringing on sidewalks or roadways. The data of Southeast Michigan residents establishes 2 cars per household, equaling 1,000 automobiles just in the homes. This isn't even regarding commercial workers in those areas, which would be a lot more. All of these items and more show an overdeveloped, high-density development that would obscure Hartland's landscape forever and put us on a path towards poorly zoned and overdeveloped communities like White Lake, Waterford, Novi, and Canton, just to name a few. The Mayberry proposal saturates these 108 acres with so much development that it is easy to predict overpopulation with irresponsible density and the related problems that rural township never have to entertain. Resident recommendations of the Planning Commission and the Board on the Mayberry proposal are as follows. Reduce all proposed residential dwellings to a 250-unit maximum. Cap the number of apartments without later revisions based on market conditions. No drive-through restaurants, no gas stations, no car wash. Triple the setbacks on all roads and prohibit all 0 setbacks. Triple all landscape screens to 60 feet and utilize different varieties of pine trees. No brick walls with Mayberry advertisements. 12-foot berms around the entire development with large pine tree screens to protect from the blight of an overdeveloped property in a rural setting. All plantings will be of the mature pine variety to protect the rural setting year-round. No entrances or exits on Fenton or Pleasant Valley. Tie in all properties within the developments of the Hartland water supply. No wells anywhere in the development. Require over-standard road widths. Minimum home spacing of 30 feet in all areas, including cluster homes. All driveways extended in length and width to contain a minimum of 2 vehicles parked side by side without infringing on sidewalks or streets. All lighting to be of the lowest candlelight or lumen option available. These resident recommendations are just a few as the process proceeds, and when more definitions of the proposal are submitted, will require resident feedback. We request to hold the Mayberry proposal to these resident concerns as the approval process continues. Hartland is a beautiful rural community. People buy homes here because they value the character. Destroying that with this ill-conceived high-density development is totally contrary to what Hartland has always been. We strongly urge the Hartland leadership, who care about the township as much as we do, to act responsibly and protect Hartland's rural culture for generations to come. I also want to thank Mr. Elliott here from McKenna, who did a fine job on the review. I haven't heard anybody telling the developer or seen, unless it's happened before or behind the scenes, telling the developer to take these recommendations and make changes to the plan. So I don't know in the process, and I know that this is just statements only, no questions answered, but at what point do we start looking at these reviews and implementing them and telling the developer to make changes and come back with different proposals? So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? I got something for our technical people in the back. I'm getting a couple texts that the broadcast at home is not going out and the sound is bad, and I'm checking the monitor here, and it is also doing the same thing. So if you could check that in the back room. Looks good on the screen up here, but apparently not at home and not on the monitor at my desk. Good evening. If we could get your name and address and your comments, please.
I'm Dan Olding, and I represent the property at 2254 Fenton Road. That's a 40-acre parcel. It's on the east side of Fenton Road, just across from Deer Track Lane. I started to make a list of concerns after the last meeting that I attended, and while reviewing some information and searching for some stuff on the Hartland Township website, I discovered that the McKenna Associates had really addressed almost every concern that I had. Maybe not as vehemently as I would have, but they did a good job. And I would encourage the Planning Commission to review all that carefully. I'm not opposed to development on N59 and Fenton Road, but I would prefer it to be more as needed and casual. I am opposed to this planned development concept, especially of this diversity, density, and size. Why do we want to create a new town or small city that's micromanaged into, 10, 15 years into the future by people that don't even live in this community? And I realize that, what's behind a lot of this, and this goes back 10 years or more, is the township would love to absolve these 1.6 million in sewer assessments. But that's going to come with a lot of future costs and problems if they do it this way. I think the whole concept of this planned development thing is a bad idea. It was a bad idea in 2005. It's still a bad idea. There's no need for 2 gas stations and any kind of auto services at that corner. You can go less than 2 miles either way, and you're there. High density promotes decay. A rural area can heal itself some over time. Hartland has been a rural community and should remain that way for all the people that live here. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else? Again, there will also be an opportunity at the end of the meeting, too. Please come forward.
Good evening.
Hello.
My name is Carrie Angot, A-N-G-O-T-T. I live at 2075 Wilson Lane, which is located on the northeast side of Fenton Road and M59. We have several concerns about this development being on the north-south side of 59 Fenton Road, Pleasant Valley. Number one, 2 gas stations, like everybody's been saying, why do we need more? We already have a gas station at Hickory Ridge Road, actually 2 of them. They are planning on expanding the Speedway at 23 and 59. Also, if I'm not mistaken, they just approved for Clark Road to put in a gas station. Why do we need 2 more? Why do we need another car wash? We already have a family car wash here, as well as a do-it-yourself car wash. If that's not convenient, there's not one too far away in Highland. Not that we want to deter from our local businesses, but why do we need another one? If you build another one and there's not enough frequency, what's going to happen? People aren't going to go to that car wash, and it's going to close down. That's going to be an eyesore for our community if they don't sell that business. Do we want an eyesore? Not only that, multi-complexes. Like everybody's been saying, it's going to increase traffic. Do you know what it's like on M59 and Fenton Road? Look at how many car accidents there have been. Look at how many deaths there have been there. The increase of traffic is going to be significant. And do you know what it's like for us to pull out? Because I'm on right off of Wilson Lane, which is right off of 59. There's times when we're waiting 10, 15 minutes to get out onto 59. If you increase that traffic right there at 59 and Fenton Road with these businesses and these residentials, are you going to put a stoplight closer to so everybody can get in and out of their residence? It's just going to cause a lot more traffic. And I've lived in Waterford, and there's a reason why we moved out of Waterford, to come out to a community, a rural-type community. I'm not opposed to developing the land, but just not in the significance that they're proposing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Steve Smith. I live at 657 Tipsco Lake Road. I take Fenton Road every day, and I've lived out here for 30 years. This just does not belong in Hartland. I mean, we all know it. Looking at it, just doesn't belong here. That's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Good evening.
Me again.
You again.
Hi, my name's
Welcome.
Dana Gardner. I live at 2215 Fenton Road, and we own the house next door. As I looked out my field this morning, I'm trying to visualize buildings. We've had that field there since we've lived there since '74. It belonged to my aunt's family. They have farmed it. It's been there. Okay, I can understand a few houses. Everyone wants to move here, but with the diagrams they showed the other day on those cluster condos, we could probably fit 12 of them in our property. So it's like, this is crazy. We don't need it that many. We need to look at it, and we need to look at all these people coming in, schools, protection. There's a lot of concerns here. I'd like to keep Hartland, my town, 4 generations, the same as it was, and I know it will never be the same, but we don't need it this busy. It is not the gateway to Hartland. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no more at this call to the public, we'll close the call to the public. We do not have a public hearing this evening, which is item 7, so we can move right on to the topic for the evening, item 8A, which is the Newberry Preliminary Plan Development number 535P, which is a mixed-use development. So if the applicant would like to come up, that'd be great.
Could you explain where we are?
Yep, we're going to do that.
Okay.
For those that were here last week, we're going to pick up with the McKenna review letter where we left off. For those of you that weren't here last week or didn't watch it at home, last week we had a public hearing for this particular application. The applicant went through and did a proposal, a presentation of their proposal for everyone, and then we allowed the public to make comment. We then closed the public hearing and we began going through the McKenna letter, which was referenced in the call to the public, and are going through that letter page by page. So that is where we left it. We ended, I don't know, 939-45 last week. And if my memory serves me correctly, we are now on page 7, which would be item 4, building height. But before we get there, there have been a lot of comments about density. I just want to take a moment, and some watched our meeting a month ago when we had an apartment project proposed on a corner here in the township, and talked about this doesn't belong here, this is commercial, it doesn't fit the plan. As property owners, you have rights. People who own property that want to develop it have rights. There are plans in the township. There's a zoning map which tells us how the property can be developed or is zoned, and then there's what we call a comprehensive plan, which includes a future land use map. The future land use map and the comprehensive plan have been in place for a long time, early 2000s. This particular parcel, along with a, I believe, 40-acre parcel immediately to the west that joins it on the south side, were designated in the as a special planning area in the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. At that time, the vision for this parcel back 15 years ago was something very similar to this. So as the property owners, they are coming forward with a plan that they would like to propose that they believe follows the comprehensive plan and the special planning area as designated. So we are reviewing it. We are going through it. There was a lot of thought that went into it before I was even on the Planning Commission. And this plan was approved, very similar, although slightly different, at the preliminary phase back in the mid-2000s, maybe 2007? 2007. So that developer did not complete the process. The economy, we all know, took a turn for the worse, and this particular group and organization has picked it up and is now presenting what you see here. In regards to the density, there were some comments made last week, myself being one of them, that I was concerned about the density and some of the flexibility of ending up with too many apartments. At the end of the meeting, we requested our planning director to pull out the 2007 approved plan. It made it available for planning commissioners to take a look at, to see what was different about it, because this one seemed to have a different mix of the residential units. And I know some of you were looking at it before this evening's meeting, and I guess my question is going to be, are there any comments from anyone? I do have one, but I can wait until others speak if you like.
I don't have any comment. Do you?
No, my comment was it looks very similar,
Yeah.
actually. Yep, the density is very similar.
I believe there are 4 units less than what was proposed in 07. Mike, anything from you?
Yeah, after reviewing the previous plans that were approved, personally I like the layout that is being presented tonight over the former one. The apartment complexes are now nestled inside of the surrounding duplexes and condo single-family homes, which I think breaks up the buildings very nicely. So personally, I prefer this layout over the previous one.
Okay. And I will add the comment that I support that. The difference in the old plan to this plan, the big thing noticeable on the north side was that the outside perimeter of the old plan was lined with, I'll call, townhomes that were built more like brownstone. They were about 2.5 stories high in the air, and they lined the whole perimeter. So all of the folks on Deer Path and the folks on Fenton Road, what you would have seen was the backside of basically 2.5 story buildings that would have looked like apartments but they weren't. So what we have now and what they have done, and I do think that we need to take that into consideration, is transitioned from your larger lot, single-family homes into what they're calling cluster homes and duplexes. While the lots are small, the density on the outside is less than it was, and the height of the buildings are less than they were in the old plan. And we did pull it out. We have it here. You're welcome to take a look at it. So there has been some effort on their part, of which, I'll be honest with you, I was not prepared to interact last week with you on that. I'll stress the same concern I have, and I think you do need some flexibility with the residential types of units that you want. I'll stand by my comment. I don't want to see you increase the density over what it's, if this goes through, if this gets approved, and there are many steps to go, so everybody understands. I'd like to see it not increase over what it is, and I'd like to see if we can't limit that apartment component and allow you flexibility with more of your cluster homes and those types of things. Personal opinions.
And one other comment, now that we're talking about the difference, was we noticed the plan in 2007 on the north side had the townhomes Larry mentioned, but then there was a road on the perimeter, so that the road was a perimeter road, so it would have been between the homes and the property line.
That's correct.
Difference. Now the roads are internal.
All of the parking and the cars and all of that were between the building and the back property line of those homes on Fenton and Deer Pass. So they've flipped that. The road's on the internal, on the inside, so
Right.
Shouldn't hear a whole lot of car doors slamming. Just wanted to address it because I think we weren't as prepared maybe for that discussion last week based upon the applicant's comment. So with that being said, what I'd like to do is pick up the McKenna review letter that we started with last week, and it's dated March 29th, and we're on item 4, building height. And I think what I'd like to do is use the same format we did last week and turn it over to Greg Elliott, who actually wrote this letter, and ask for some input on that.
So building height, I think, is fairly unremarkable. All of the various lot layout sheets that you've seen in the packet, there's one for each style of development proposed in the PD, has a specified maximum building height. None of them are above the maximum that's permitted in a planned development, which is 35 feet. I do note, for your edification, and so that you're not surprised by this, that average height per the zoning ordinance is defined as the height between the ridge and the eaves. So, for example, in the case of the architectural feature that's associated with the gas station canopy on the north parcel, that tower, if you will, on top of the canopy is in fact 43 feet in height, though I gather as they calculate it at an average point, they represent that will not exceed the maximum for the district. So.
I read a note in the ordinance, maybe I'm wrong, but I saw that it said the 35-foot max, just like you described it, except for they would allow chimneys, spires, cupolas, towers to exceed that height by another 15 feet.
Right.
So I don't know if that feature is considered one of those, but just as a comment.
Right. Well, and that might be so as well. But in any event, you are going to have structures out there that are higher than 35 feet. Is the point I want to make.
In your review, is it only that feature? The rest of it, did I hear you say? And what I read, it would appear as though their limitations are going to comply with the height ordinance.
That's the way it's represented. I mean, obviously, not everything is designed.
Correct.
You can't see all that.
And that is our intent. Follow the ordinance.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this gas canopy should the gas station come to be?
I'm not crazy about the cupolas.
Yeah, right.
I'm not real crazy about the cupolas. Being up so tall, but that's just my opinion.
It almost looked like a design feature from your eye level perspective, like you almost said, here's your corner big feature, and then beyond it you're showing depth of the development. I don't know if that was planned or not. I know that you could design it that height or lower. I don't know if that was on purpose. Was that something?
Say that again?
So when you look at your birds, how you've got the different views, when you have the ground level
Bird's eye
view,
view.
at ground, it shows, that gateway architecture, but then it shows beyond it that height of that taller feature, and I didn't know if it was on purpose to show depth of your development or not. Just a question. It was planned, because it really doesn't have to be that tall, but maybe it was a design
Right.
feature.
Yeah, again, it's the cupolas that, we could certainly pull those down, but that is a architectural feature that kind of helps break up, massing of roofs and things like that. The more that you can cut those roofs up and add some sort of design feature to that, then the better that it is, but we can certainly pull some of that back.
Well, I was wondering if the posts that are holding the canopy up came down at all. I don't know if what the regulated height of the gas canopy is.
The minimum height.
Okay, so that wouldn't be an option.
Yeah, those were 16 feet for clearance.
Yep.
But then from 16 feet up to the 43, I think there's room to
Right.
play with that.
Okay.
Now, that's a pretty steep roof pitch as
Yeah.
well, so that could be
Right.
could be modified a little bit. But
All right.
But I think right now we meet the ordinance in terms of the main roof massing, and then allowing cupolas or chimneys or whatever above that.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that?
Okay.
Okay, well then let's move on to item 5, which is the minimum yard requirements. I think on this one, what we might want to do is let's flip it to Greg, and then I'd like the applicant's response on these, because I think people need to understand what this TND type development is, because I think that's greatly impacting these.
Right, so we prepared a chart that compares what the minimum standard that's specified in the planned development district would be in the middle column versus what's proposed in the right-hand column, and so then anything that is in the italics in the right-hand column is different than what is proposed, and you have the flexibility, you in conjunction with the Township Board and approving the PD, have the flexibility to provide for alternate setbacks. I would say that with a development of this sort, the most significant of these are the first two rows, which relate to the perimeter setbacks. When you're talking about a traditional neighborhood design type of project or development type of project, internally you're going to expect things to be zero lot line and lesser than you would otherwise see. But around the perimeter, that may or may not be so. And so they are proposing some things that are less than what the ordinance would require along the perimeter. And maybe you want to take them category by category. So the first category then is the setback along M59 and along Pleasant Valley and Fenton roads, so the street side perimeter. For commercial uses under the PD standards, 75 feet minimum is called for. Their proposal is for 50 feet minimum. And then we note also that in certain places, parking that's perpendicular to M59 is within 26 feet of the right-of-way of the road. And then the standards in the ordinance would call for 50-foot minimum setback in the case where residential is adjacent to the road right-of-way. And they do meet that requirement. So the proposed variances with respect to the distance to commercial areas.
Okay. Anything you'd like to help us understand your proposal or your request?
Yeah, just on the commercial, one of the drivers for this obviously was to try and get the residential, again, for our traditional neighborhood development sort of feel, is to get that a little bit denser in behind the commercial area. So there was a need to push that commercial a little bit closer to the street. Doesn't look a lot different than what's going on down M59 in terms of some of the other developments that have been developed down through there as well. Some of the other commercial. So our feeling was that that was what we needed at 50 feet.
I do think that also this was similar to the previous plan, having the parking in front of the commercial areas. And it's also something that helps the viability of the commercial that's there. It's difficult. You mentioned before, we're a nation of convenience, and it's difficult to get people to come. If a great deal of of the users of the site are coming from the M59, they'll stop there if they can see the parking. So we allowed that to encroach within the setback, but we also did make sure to provide enhanced landscape along the road to help screen that view of the parking.
What is the elevation difference between M59 and the parking lot surface on the south side? The parking lot's sitting below M59. The property currently sits below 59.
Significantly, that elevation.
Yeah, so you're not changing much of the elevation.
No.
So your development is going to sit down from M59 as the land currently sits.
Correct.
So, and that also allows you, we have to provide parking for commercial businesses, and that allows you to have the main parking lots also separated from that residential, so that there's not so much mixing between cars that are circulating in just for the commercial buildings versus cars that are circulating into the residences.
Sue?
So I agree with what you're saying, but then when I read our ordinance, and I think I need to be corrected if I'm wrong, because I really studied the setback rules, what I understand is there's a section that says that on Fenton Road, Pleasant Valley, and M59, that those setbacks should actually be 80 feet, that supersedes the district requirements. And where I found that was in section 3.245.
And you're talking about a setback for the buildings?
Yep. And then there's another section that talks about, for setbacks, that parking, off-street parking in yards in the commercial, the office, the multifamily, may be located only in the side, rear, or non-required front yards. So we've got an ordinance that's saying, to keep it out of the required front yard. And what I'm reading is our setback has to be 80 feet because we're abutting M59 and Fenton and Pleasant Valley. So I guess I want to make sure really what is the requirements and then talk about what we can allow.
Well,
can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
Our setback of these commercial buildings here is actually 101 feet.
Right.
There. So we're not encroaching at that point. Over here, it's 109 feet. I believe the closest that we get here is the car wash / gateway feature there on this particular view that we're looking at on the south side. So I'm trying to find where the encroachments are the least here. On the north side, I'm seeing 65 feet and 50-foot setback on the commercial parcel on the north side. So we are, varying from, we are asking for variance from that.
Sure.
Well, and not for or against, I'm just pointing out, in a planned development, the opportunity exists to do that, and you're looking at the whole package of what they're proposing. So if they're looking to lessen a setback, what in exchange is happening for the total project? It could be enhanced landscaping. It could be a number of things.
Sure.
So if it were straight up zoning, they're going to follow the letter of the law in the planned development with the give and take. So you've got to be comfortable with what they're proposing right now.
That's right, and I see a lot of merit in that, but then I'm trying to understand what was the reason initially for that 80-foot setback and keeping the parking out of it, because we've been looking at, unfortunately, KFCs, the other gas station on Clark. Everybody's had to hold back. Now, I know when I was working with Hartland, they wanted to have a greenway between M59 and their first businesses. I wasn't here when those setback rules were started, but I know down the path, everybody's kind of maintained that. I don't know if that was the idea, don't know, but I want to at least think about it as we start to come in, if that is a trade-off, if that's something we want to do, or if there was a bigger idea before for that setback. And keeping, like I say, even, they said the parking out of that front yard, that 80 feet. And that's what we've been looking at least in my last 4 years. When we've been working on those projects, we've asked them to do it. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. If we're going for it, that would be, just like you say, Larry, we're allowed to do it, I get it, and there's a lot of merit to what you're doing, but I want us to all realize that.
Absolutely.
So my comment on that would be, along with you, Sue, that depending on what the township will eventually build out to, we have these current developments already in with the setback, and we do have the requirement here. I personally like the look of the setback. There are a lot of trade-offs here. Another question, though, I have is the parking area that eats, or is it 26 feet, is that also to work to that same 75 or 80-foot setback?
Not sure I understand the question.
So is it the setback to the face of the buildings, or what's the setback for the parking lot?
Normally it is the same front yard, but I believe you have a provision in your ordinance to reduce that in certain circumstances, which I don't have at the tip of my fingers. But it's, regardless for the PD, it is flexible. I get your point about whether or not, in the section you're citing does say any district, these shall be the setbacks. On the other hand, the PD district says, you can waive the setbacks if there's a pattern book created. And, I don't think I'm going to interpret, as you want to have interpret the ordinance necessarily as between those two things. I'll just point out that there are those two provisions which are somewhat at tension. As we read it, we deemed the 80-foot to be a setback applicable as a hard and fast rule for conventional development, but not necessarily for planned development.
Right. Can you, just a question, the row of parking that is perpendicular to 59, that row that is closest to 59, those are 20-foot deep parking places?
Yes, I believe we changed them all from the 9x18 to 10 by 20, yes.
Well, that driveway would still count the same. The road, I was going to say, could we eliminate those, push the buildings forward with the row of parking immediate to the buildings, and then put the parking between the residential and the building, and get parking on both sides of the building?
I think we're going to have parking on both sides.
I think we're going to be in the same situation.
I do see that a couple of rows down here in your chart, there's parking lot setback between the parking lot and property line adjacent to the road. Does that apply to Pleasant Valley, Fenton?
No, I think those are internal roads.
Those are internal roads? Okay.
Right. I will point out, I don't think that it's 26 feet all the way along M59. I think that the road is angling. And so at the far west end, that's where it's 26 feet, and then it's greater as you go to the east.
That's right.
Is the issue on the north and the south?
The north is not the same issue. They have a place where probably the stacking for the drive-through facility that's adjacent to Fenton Road is going to be fairly close. The pavement itself is within 21 feet of the right-of-way of Fenton Road, but it's hard to tell how close the stacking exactly is within that. Mm-hmm. That's the closest they come on the north side of the road. And then they do have a little stretch there by the gas station.
By the gas station, there's a
projects into the
few parking spaces there that project in.
I don't think it gets as close as 26, though. It looks like maybe it's within
40 feet.
40 feet.
Certainly not knowing what will happen to Fenton Road. Probably going to need a right-hand turn lane or something added to it and widened, but it looks like they're, for the audience's benefit, they're 53 feet from the pavement. Right-of-way lines are different than pavement lines.
Right, and this is considering future right-of-way that they're dedicating as part of the project.
Right.
Down. Be this one. Might clear it out. Oh, this right here. Right here. Everyone.
We're not jumping to landscaping. How heavy do you consider your screening along M59, Pleasant Valley and Fenton Road?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
We're not going to jump to landscaping, but how would you describe the landscaping along those three thoroughfares to the public?
So the landscape along Road has a varying pattern that's designed that has canopy trees, ornamental trees, some clusters of shrubs, and then is supplemented with grasses and perennials. So it's a nice landscape look. It's not like a solid massing of trees, but kind of a very designed landscape that has piers at the entrances, community signs, things like that.
How's your elevation compared to Pleasant Valley and Fenton Road, the parking lot elevations?
I thought it was lower. I can check the grading plan, though.
Pleasant Valley drops off, I think, right at the corner. There's a high spot right there that's kind of even with the road, but more than likely that'll be pulled out, and the rest of that drops off. Fenton currently does as well, but I believe our intent with the grading plan is to build some of that back up at the Fenton area.
Well, one of the things I can say for the 59, particularly the south side, and Sue, you're in landscape architecture, but with that parking lot sitting substantially below 59, by the time they put all their landscaping in, you're going to be looking over the top of it.
But
You're not going to see it.
Yeah, it would be definitely good to see a section through, look at the grades, all of that. I know that the landscape screening, as you were asking about right now, you've got that LAR kind of strip. Our ordinance requires that it's an evergreen all year long. I know that some of your plant materials kind of have some gaps between, and maybe you're using like ornamental grasses. So I think when we talk about that, we want to make sure that, like you're thinking between the grade and the plantings, that at least all year long it's screened. Grasses work along pretty good, but then in the spring we know kind of have to start up again.
But I think you're going to look right over that row of cars.
It's just maybe we could see a section of it and kind of get a comfort level how that would work. Because there is a lot of benefit to not having the road behind the residences, like you said.
So I'm concerned with the final build-out of the road. Right now in the area, M59, it's a two-lane road, but approaching Pleasant Valley, there's a turn lane. I just wonder if that road will widen someday, and the area that that's in question, these setbacks, the parking lot will inevitably be eaten up a little bit. I don't know if there's been a study regarding that.
Well, there should be an indication where the right-of-way would be, unless the road department were to condemn and obtain additional.
Yeah, and they're coming off the right-of-way line, not the road. That's the important thing that people need to keep in mind. When they say they're 50 feet off the setback, it's the right-of-way. It's not the pavement.
Right.
And I don't know the answer to that, Tom. My only comment would be is I drive 59 occasionally, and it never gets more than about 2 lanes wide anywhere in terms of one direction.
Correct.
It's 5 lanes max. Certainly there's got to be a left turn lane extension probably on Pleasant Valley would be my guess. I think there's going to be all kinds of turn lanes added. But they're accounting for some of it in their setbacks, particularly on the north. I think we just talked about that by the gas station and the drive-through, where they're adding the additional right-of-way to the program.
Right, with respect to
right there.
To Fenton Road, they're adding additional right-of-way.
Right.
There's also right-of-way down Pleasant Valley as well.
Pleasant Valley as well.
Well, I would like to see if you could produce a cutaway for us, just to give people an idea if they're driving by in their car, just take a small SUV, and give us that cutaway. What are we going to see?
All right.
How's that?
Along M59, you're saying? Sure. Yep.
Through the parking.
Because I think there's something there that we need to see. What other comments do you have for internal road setbacks? Let's talk about the internal roads themselves. That's his next item up in there.
Well, we skipped over the rest of the perimeter.
I thought we were talking Pleasant Valley, Okay.
So then there's the perimeter that's not adjacent to, that's this next
Oh, okay.
category.
All righty, I was
Perimeter
doing the road
of
part. Okay.
That's adjacent to other people's land.
Okay.
In other words, instead of a road. So there your standard in the ordinance would be 40 feet. And they're proposing a minimum of 25 feet along the north side in places along the north side perimeter, and 30, as little as 30 feet along the south side perimeter.
Okay.
So maybe they can identify those locations. I got them marked on my plan there too, but I got to get to that sheet.
Comments?
Well, if we're going to have some sort of screening, how does that play into
I think it does play into it, because I think that's the reason the setback's there, is to create that privacy or that feeling of space. I guess we'll find out when we get to landscaping, the details on the landscaping that are proposed.
Isn't there also proposed some sort of trail there on the north side?
We talked about it at the last meeting.
Oh, it's 56 feet here. So the setback, is that, did you measure the one to the building or to the property line of the residential?
I guess we're a little confused as to where you're picking up the 25 feet.
We used your setback that you called out as the regulating setback. So you're correct that there are not necessarily things right up to that setback currently,
right,
as the plan is drawn, but this is what you propose as your regulation, right? So you've drawn a plan here that provides for a 25-foot perimeter setback on the north and a 30-foot on the south.
So like, for example, what we're zoomed in on this east side, really your setback to the building structure 56 feet. So I would think if we could find where you could regulate and say, hey, we're going to adhere to it and our setback is 50 feet or whatever we're required, maybe the way you delineate it and you can write that verbiage in, then we're going to meet our requirements. And it looks like pretty much around the perimeter you're there except for one or two places. But on this property line, looks like you could increase that, right? The way you hatch it and label it to the buildings?
Well, this setback here would be regulated on the lot diagrams for the duplexes. So that's what this other dash is. So that's their building envelope. So we have already regulated that they can't build any farther than that.
So as long as it's spelled out, the building Ds can't come any closer than 56 feet to the property line, you've exceeded our 40-foot requirement.
And we'd be good.
Or that they are, in fact, this is apropos to our discussion last time, what is allowed in that use category, in that use zone that's on the regular
Well, and
plan.
I think if they take and review the notes from last time, we're not going to be putting garages.
Regulated.
Yeah, we're going to take those opportunities out on this particular style of home, and the same with the cluster.
Right.
So it would eliminate that.
Right.
And really it would be the original home structure that you built.
Right. And we know we can't do the apartments there because we've already regulated that, so.
Right. So you're going to exceed the requirement as long as we read it the way, it really, I think you are exceeding it, and it's labeled. So where are the few, I don't have that page open at the moment. Where are the two places that you mentioned, Sue, that are an issue?
Isn't it, Greg, on the south end of that?
On the south? There is a building as close as 37 feet.
Down there.
Which is, pretty close, but, right there, if you look at the lower right of that screen, that building comes as close as 37 feet to the property line.
And the requirement is?
40.
40.
So we're close and we're near a park right now.
We're close, and again, it's the whole package.
Yeah, exactly.
I would be fine with 37. Are you fine with 37?
Again, they've called out something that is other than that, but the way it's drawn currently is 37. They've called out as 30.
Are you talking the hash marks? Is that what you're saying is 30?
They have a defined setback, so if you look over on the, right there, that's their proposed perimeter setback.
Well,
So again, this is not intended to be a final design.
that's correct.
So you got to assume that's the regulation.
So can we make
As
the
it's
side
proposed.
setback 37?
Sure.
So you'll need to move your hash marks. And you said there was another one?
I think there's another one. Is it on the other side, on the south? Oh, what's
The only perimeter, internal perimeter on the south is that side there.
okay.
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 Have we covered that topic now, Greg?
There's one other place. Before we leave.
Yep. Absolutely.
Stay right. Oh, there, try. Maybe I can get one of these pointers too.
It's a different week.
Here's one, Mike. Mike?
So, my question is, so what, in this 37-foot setback that we're now talking about, what was this structure right in here?
That's a sidewalk.
Sidewalk there.
Okay. Was there any plantings in there or anything?
Yeah, we would have foundation plantings required in most of these spaces here, and then in between there and the property line is screening.
Okay.
So, but yeah, there would be foundation plantings required around the multiple family buildings.
Does that work for you?
Yep.
I had
Yep,
one more
yep.
comment, though. I'm going back to the 80-foot setback. So I'm not sure how the road commission looks at this, if they have to approve of this, and they do not. They do not, okay. 'Cause I was
Just can't be in the right of way.
I'm sorry?
Just can't be in the right of way.
'Cause I was curious if part of that might have been for safety reasons. Given that we have a road that can travel at high rates of speed, and, that distance is now made smaller.
Yep.
If that was be another benefit to everyone's safety to stay, to keep that buffer zone, if I can call it that.
Right.
Wider.
Right. No, that issue is our issue, the setback. Now, Greg, have we covered that topic?
You have covered that.
Okay. Well, I glanced over, I was reading it the same as the 59 one. I apologize for that. So would you like to take the next one for us?
So then the next category of things are the setbacks along internal roads for buildings. And your ordinance would talk about 50-foot minimum for commercial and 40-foot minimum for residential. And then on the right-hand column there, you see that the proposal is 0 for commercial, 20 to single-family residential homes, or 12 to the porches of single-family residential homes, 10 for cluster homes, or 5 to the porches for cluster homes, 12 for duplexes, or 4 to the porches for duplexes, and 12 feet to the multiple family structures.
You would identify that, though, this type of development typically would see shorter setbacks.
Yes, yeah. No, I mean, as I say, I think, that's the nature of the thing. If you accept the T&D concept, that kind of goes along with it.
Right. I have a question for you, Scott. I was looking at your website, and you referenced last week your Avondale development.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, by the way. Are there similar features on setback of Avondale that are carried over here? Those homes we're close together.
Yeah.
They're close to the street. They're close together. Is this the similar concept?
Absolutely. Porches and zero lot lines, basically, those types of things. Obviously, you're going to have some walks in front of the homes,
right,
which you see there, and you'll have that here as well. But, yes, very similar. idea?
I learned a lot from it. I would encourage everybody to check out their website, Mayberry Homes, and check out their Avondale. You can look at all their developments, but the Avondale one, when I looked at it, reminded me of this print that I'm reading. And you had referenced it, and I just wanted to make that known to people. It is more of a known commodity. You've built something like this before.
Right. Now, Larry, that's on the highest density part, so
Right.
as indicated here on the cluster homes and the duplexes, that's really where that is. As you get into the more traditional single-family, where you're going to actually have garages fronting the street, then obviously those setbacks pull back so that we can provide, 2 vehicles in the driveway for that type of residence.
Okay.
I have a question. I don't know where it falls into the review, but I'm going to say it falls here. The setback along the internal road, and I guess it's on the north parcel, and it's the internal road that's connecting us to Fenton Road, between the kind of the commercial strip and that existing single-family home right through there. I don't know where that falls in the review, but I'm calling that an internal road kind of coming in. And the distance between that road and that home, I know you've drawn a section, but that is so darn close. I don't know when we're going to talk about it. Now's the time.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as we were going through the others, and I neglected to. But your rules about perimeter setback apply to buildings, right? And so it's not picking that up. But your point is a good one. That mixed-use street is fairly close to that home, though it is also so that home is pretty close to the property line.
So I don't know how far, number one would be the question, do you know how far that house is from the edge of the proposed internal road? And then also how far that house is from, you're proposing a 6-foot obscuring fence of some sort, how far the house will be from this fence that they're going to have. I guess I just want to study that and understand that.
Okay.
I think I'd need a scale to figure out how far the road is away.
When I scaled it, I guessed about 18 feet. And when I scaled the house to maybe the 6-foot, whatever the fence is made of, it looked like 10 to 12 foot. So that's something that I think we need to be aware of and talk about it and figure out what to do.
I think that property owner was here last week, but I don't see them here tonight.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's so tight. And you're going to be looking at, like I say, I don't know what the material yet is of this fence, but there it is 10 or so feet away. To try to help mitigate, I know, what's on the other side of it.
I mean, as it's drawn, the fence is even, it looks like the property line is on the other side of the fence. But the property line would be about 10 feet away from the house. So then the streets and all their actual pavement of the street, if that were accurate, which, you can't really rely on it to be, is more like maybe 28 feet away.
The house to the curb of the road is 28 feet? Yes.
To the degree that you can ascertain
25 to 30?
Level of detail, right?
What's your obscuring wall made of?
It's a fence.
Out of a fence.
I believe it would be wood if it's urban residential.
I think we showed a white.
Oh, is it the white fencing you're showing in the book? Okay.
Yeah, because we wouldn't really use a commercial application there, so it'd be more the residential fence,
Okay.
which is wood.
What do we propose and other comments to them on this identification of this as an issue?
Yeah, I think we're just going to have to understand, the distance is going to have to get detailed. We're going to have to really study that. That's really darn close, you can imagine.
Yeah, and that was one of our concerns in the conceptual.
Yes.
That really hasn't changed
No.
from the beginning.
I believe that's on a hill as well.
Okay, so we could
Correct?
see grades or something.
So it's like if you put the fence any farther down the slope, the fence doesn't do very much. So the closer the fence is to the property line, the better it does at actually obscuring.
Yeah. When we talked about the D units across the bottom of the page, I thought we were talking that they were more on a similar elevation to the homes. at that point, weren't they?
I think there's also...
Through the regrading of that, the north
The D
piece?
units are actually much lower than the existing homes. If you look at that cross
The cutaway that you had last-
you're looking at the second floor
Okay.
of those units. Whereas on the back property line, it's more level
Okay.
with deer path.
Yeah, and
If you look at the grading sheet that's on C-101, you'll see there's a huge slope there.
Yeah, I do recall that last week. But maybe for this, it's coming in and looking at, maybe move the building over to have an entrance up Fenton Road.
Yeah, I don't know.
What's, maybe this is a question for, what's the, for the entrance off of Fenton Road, how far do they have to be from 59? Is there, do you know?
Well, we don't know until the road commission opines on it, but
The only reason
you
why
would
I'm
expect
thinking
it
is,
to be more like 300 feet, something like that would be optimal, I would say.
I'm just thinking putting the road right there, just, if there's a, maybe have the building.
It's pretty far.
Here, if you look at sheet 08B, you can actually see the section that we've got through that home, the fence and the road there.
Not a traffic engineer, not going to pretend to be one here tonight, but anxious to see your traffic report. But, and I understand it's another exit out of the development on another road other than 59. Would there be any benefit or consideration to not having that road there at all?
I think part of it's going to depend on the fire department, as long as they're okay with it. We certainly
I think the people that live on Fenton Road would love it,
right,
to not have those people coming out and clogging up their right-hand turn lanes and things that
I mean, there's really no benefit for us. The only reason why we...
True.
Do you know what I mean? Because everyone knows, no one likes the exit off of Clark Road.
Correct.
The Myers, but everybody uses it, so it's like...
That's correct.
I mean, and it's not just Hartland people, it's people that...
Oh, yeah. No, I understand.
From everywhere.
Just a thought, as we try and work through what are we going to do for those, for that residential home. Yes, it's built very close to the property line, and
I was
there.
thinking if you could almost move the building that's being suggested and move the, I don't know if you can, I know it's a grid, and they're putting a grid in here, we were just talking about that. But somehow either eliminate it or have it come in from a different angle, like up there, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it could come, maybe it would act more as a road for that commercial place versus the homes. And
that would take the traffic off and still leave an alternative route.
For the fire truck.
For a fire truck.
I mean, we have added the curb cut there on 59, so that could potentially give the fire department a second.
Yep. And if the access road wouldn't be too close to M59, which that will be a Livingston County Road Commission decision.
Right.
If you pulled it out and put it between, if you could put it between the restaurant and the gas station.
Yeah, I think that's going to be too close.
It could very well be. Something to take a look at.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
It's that road is really only servicing those vehicles headed south on Fenton Road. I mean, conceivably, anybody else wanting to access the gas station, the restaurant, the drive-through, would be coming in off of M59, I would believe. So...
Yeah, the only benefit is for somebody on Fenton.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's really the only benefit to having a side street.
Well, we haven't seen the road improvement requirements fully yet. Well, they're in here, but we haven't seen the traffic study and everything on what's going to happen at that intersection.
So,
and Caitlin makes a good point, too. Anybody in the community that doesn't want to go onto M59, that's a good outlet for them then to...
It is, other than if you're at southbound Fenton 59, I'll bet you, I don't travel it, don't know, but I'll bet you most people turn left or are going to get on 59. Pleasant Valley's gravel. And unless you need to get down south to 96 or something, I would imagine most people are probably making a turn.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, parking lot setbacks, Greg?
So I think that's in italics, but it really shouldn't have been. The number's not in italics. So they have proposed 25 feet, which would exceed what would be required for commercial parking lot setback to an internal street.
Okay. Any comments on that? How about parking lots?
Now, of course, they have some amount of parallel parking on the streets, too.
Well, are you getting that? Okay. I'll let you take the next topic then.
So between the parking lot and the property line adjacent to the road.
You wrote it.
Yeah, so I will just observe that the only place that would appear to be an issue as it relates to your ordinance requirements is along the senior residential. If you deem senior to be residential, which is the way we were thinking about it, then, which is not what the plan says, of course.
Right.
It deems it to be commercial, but we think of it as residential. So in that case, that comes within, that parking for the senior facility comes within 20 feet of the mixed-use street.
In situations like this, where we come within that distance, we require additional screening along the parking lot. You just can't see that on this plan,
right,
on the landscape plan. So there's that buffer required there.
Okay, we'll hit that when we get to the landscape plan. Any comments on that? Just got to have a place to put the snow. Greg, next.
So then just our general comment about the setbacks were that you should discuss, as you have been, whether or not these reduced setbacks are appropriate and necessary to achieve traditional neighborhood development, assuming that you deem T&D to be a substantial benefit and that this development is in fact consistent with those principles.
Okay. Any other questions on that? They've got a few things to work on.
Yeah.
Right.
Item 6, required distance between buildings. Back to you, Greg.
Okay, so for the first category is detached, single-family, and cluster residential. And what the PUD minimums would say in that situation is 30 feet between structures with a 15-foot minimum side yard requirement. What the proposal is 10 feet between structures for single-family homes, minimum, and 12 feet for cluster homes with a 5-foot minimum side yard setback. You want me to go through them all, or you want to do one at a time?
Whatever you think we should do.
Well, you maybe should talk about it, or
Okay.
we'll lose track of...
All right. You want to talk about the single-family and cluster homes? Any comments? I know that in the last plan that was approved, the distance between the single-family homes was agreed at the 10 feet. And what we got the applicant to agree to was that there wouldn't be a zero-lot setback because we could run into problems with homes right on the property line. You agreed that it would be a minimum 5 foot each.
Correct.
So I will add that to the mix. That did come up in one of our pre-conference meetings. Do you wish me to move on?
I don't know. It seems like 10 feet is awfully tight. But the homes that you're building in Howell, is that greater than 10 feet apart?
Those are a little bit different in terms of the way the plat was arranged. The ones in Avondale that he's talking about are 10 feet. The ones in Howe are actually 3 feet and 16 feet. And the reason why they were set up that way from the original developer was because they required a rear load garage, and they needed a driveway to come down beside the house. So those are actually 20 feet. 19 feet.
Is that the those remind me of Avondale right there. Is that the, there it is at the bottom, Avondale.
That is Avondale.
That is conceptually what they're talking about in their single family.
It's pretty common for this type of development. We would have tightened up Howe if we'd had any control over the plat, but we didn't.
You picked that development up.
We did.
After it wasn't.
We actually changed from the rear load garages to a front load garage, but in that process did not change the setbacks.
Okay. Comments on the side yard setbacks?
I have seen this type of structure, with 10 feet setbacks. And I guess it's all right with me. It's not something I would desire, but but I have seen them over on, especially when you get over on the east side of the state. It kind of gives you the brownstone effect, type of thing, which is fine if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, again, it's just trying to create that, neighborly, walkable sort of community. Neighbors sitting on the porch, each one sitting on their own porch, talking with each other and those types of things. There are some better pictures, kind of to Larry's point earlier. If you look at the Avondale website, it gives you a little bit better view of what that actually looks like. There's several pictures in terms of streetscapes and things like that you pick that up. Very similar to this, but
that
a little
lower picture looked familiar.
Yeah, a little tighter shot.
So my comment would be the same as Michael's, that it seems close. And I don't know that it's for me, but that doesn't have to be for me, right? People would be shopping in here for this home because they're interested in it. And that the walkable, so it seems like a closer than I've probably seen. So that would just be a comment.
To me, it's a package of the whole deal. That's why I'm trying to give feedback, but you got to see the whole thing. You got to get through the houses, you got to get the setbacks, you got to get the architecture, you got to get the landscaping, because it's a package deal. If you don't build good-looking houses, they're going to look horrible 10 feet apart.
Exactly.
If you want to put the detail into them the way you're doing it, it actually, they look like upscale, small homes to me. Cottages. So it's the package. That's why I can't comment on a setback or something totally, because I need to see it all. I have seen it all, but it's not fair to start commenting on landscaping that we haven't gotten to yet.
And I'm the same, I'm trying to see how we integrate to our community that's got, quote, a rural character, but we're also having to provide this density. So I'm looking at internal, it's a T&D product. It's probably not for any of us in this room, but, there is marketing and you're making a really nice product. And so internally, to achieve that density, if you put this together to honor that, I'm good with that. I'm looking at the perimeter and how to integrate back to our neighborhood. So I'm kind of going, okay, fine, put it all together, make a great product, and let's work on these edges and how to work together.
And again, I'll come back to where I started. I'm not endorsing your plan yet, but this is not new to Hartland Township. This plan, the special planning area, the concepts that are here were devised by planning commissioners and now some on the board and board members that were here in the early 2000s. You have a different group of people now, and I see the value in it. We've done independent housing studies, and they say there is a market for this, that we need this. And I understand we all want our 5 and 10 and 40 acre parcels, but we are on M59. And it was planned to be something like this. So I'm being very open to what you're presenting.
Sure.
Joe, do you have anything to add to it?
No, I think 10 feet is tight, but if you have a product that they're proposing like this, I could see this working working that in here. I mean, it's not unlike the village of Hartland in some respects.
Right.
Look how those structures are done. Most of them have no lot to speak of. These, of course, would be more luxury or more upgraded, but newer, of course. I could see how this could work, especially with the walkable aspect of it. And it is a product. I know that the township, went forward with a housing study, and the truth is, folks, we live at 23 and 59. Our fate was kind of drawn when that decision was made to put two highways that basically cuts through our township, and these are property owners that own this land, so we can't zone out types of housing. What we have to do is we have to find ways to accommodate the housing that is in demand, and hopefully we can insist upon architectural elements and things like that, landscaping, to make it pleasant and not court-ordered apartment buildings. That's what happens to communities that decide they want to fight certain types of development or what have you. The truth is that this is a good product, and I'd like to see it come through, but there are a number of questions. I'm not necessarily endorsing the project at this point either, but I could see this working, but in exchange for what? And I'm waiting for the exchange.
Right.
So to see what we need to do over there. But I'm cognizant of public safety, police, fire, internal traffic issues, external traffic issues. Those are all concerns of mine, especially because I think, and my hope is that the road commission will take a look at some of the things that need to happen in Pleasant Valley if this project does move forward in some way, in some manner. So.
Okay. Where are we, Greg? We're on distance between residential and non-residential?
The next one is multiple family duplex and senior housing. So the PD ordinance would require 30-foot front yards, 25-foot rear yards, 10-foot side yards. They are in the 20-plus foot range for these products. Only the senior living product meets the referenced PD standards, though, so the duplex and multiple would be less than, in some cases, than what the ordinance would require.
Well, we just talked about side yards and front yards. This stuff's supposed to be close to the road. It's what it is. Any additional feedback on any of that? John? Okay. How about distance between residential and non-residential structures, Greg?
Right, so the ordinance calls for 100 feet minimum. On the north, that's as little as 80 feet of separation, and then on the south, it's as little as 50 feet.
Are you talking the distances between
commercial buildings and residential buildings?
But they're their buildings or the existing residential buildings?
I know this is internal to the...
Internal to their development.
Correct.
So if you're moving in, it's kind of there.
Assuming it's there.
Yeah.
Assuming that phase has come to pass at that point, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of what's driving that, obviously, is if you're okay with the setbacks of the commercial buildings and the residential buildings to the street, then you're going to have a tighter overall setback between types of uses. So that's kind of what's driving it.
Okay. Is there any feedback on that? Comments?
Not for me.
Okay, Greg, you want to lead us into parking and loading?
Okay. So the parking and loading calculations appear on sheet 3, and those are consistent with, as calculated, with the standards that are set out in sections 5.8 and 5.9 of the zoning ordinance for the uses that are specified, except for the following modifications that are set forth in the schedule. So with respect to loading spaces, I guess we had some question as to what they were. Let me ask, if I can, of the applicant, first of all, are they in fact kind of hatched areas?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I couldn't find a legend that told me that, but it seemed like that's what they were. And so if that is so, then I think I'm not suggesting that they're not adequate in any way, but I think you should just have calculations showing, because it's your ordinance standard, that no use that requires it is more than 300 feet distant from such a space. So they should just add that information as
So can you add that to your plan?
part of their next submittal.
Okay.
That's loading spaces. Parallel parking, what the ordinance would require is an 8 by 23 foot spot with 3 feet of separation and a 12 between parking spots and a 12-foot aisle adjacent to it, driving aisle adjacent to it. So what it appears to me is designed as a 6-foot spot plus 2 feet on the gutter pan, so 8 feet using the gutter pan. And then only 22 feet of length for the spots. And the width of the travel lane was not called out on the detail, but it's a function of the street design. Is that correct? Yeah.
Do you have experience with parallel parking design in your firm, or you've put that down? Do you know if the 22 versus the 23 is a standard? We don't have a lot of parallel parking in Hartland.
We've done streetscapes where it's about this dimension before the 22 feet. Sometimes it's a little shorter on the ends because in a streetscape you usually have bump outs. I've also seen them larger. Usually we have to conform to city standards, and usually they do have standards that are larger than this, but we feel that the 22 feet would be adequate.
Does it pose a problem in your parking calculation if you just took that row of parallel parking and wiped one out and took that distance and divided it by the remaining spots?
I'd have to work with it, but
It's just a couple spots.
Possible.
Sure. But then we end up with a little bit larger.
If that's what you prefer, if that's not acceptable to you.
We don't have a lot of parallel parking experience in Hartland.
Right.
Bigger could be better.
Well, I think that's generally true everywhere. I would say many people no longer have parallel parking experience, and so the bigger it is, the easier it is to use.
So if a suggestion would be would maybe to delete one in every row and then just divvy the space up.
We'll take a look at it.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment on that?
Yes. Starting on the north side here, where are all of the parallel parking?
So we have striped parallel parking on the boulevards and on the mixed-use streets, and then we allow parallel parking on the residential streets. It's just not striped, so it's kind of a situation where it's more informal. People are, the cars are parked, and you kind of have to drive down the road slowly because it's not a very wide street. That's intentional. You don't really want cars to be, being able to have such a wide aisle that they can just zoom down these streets when you've got, children playing and crossing. So it's intentionally small, but again, this is the traditional neighborhood kind of dimensions that we're working with on that street.
So is the thought then, in a design like this, that the narrower the streets, the slower people will drive?
That is the assumption, yes. Yeah, kind of by necessity, yes.
Do you allow that on both sides of the street or parallel parking on the residential street?
It is allowed on both sides of the street.
One of the things we'll do is make sure the fire marshal takes a peek at that.
Right.
Because he'll want to be able to get his fire trucks through there too, in case they're of an emergency.
So,
in the multiple families section, between the buildings labeled A for the folks in the audience, is there any available parking inside for
Yes.
for guests of that?
Yes, so you can't really see it here, but there's tiny indentations, and that's where each one of these has a garage, and then we also have space available outside here. The alley is right down the center, and then guests can park outside of the garages on either side.
And we've made those deep enough from the garage so that you can actually park 2 vehicles.
Okay. I was going to say that was one of my concerns. I have visited setups like this where when you have some guests over, they're kind of...
And we've provided the same thing in the cluster homes as well. So each of those driveways is deep enough to park 2 cars, and on the duplexes themselves, there's actually a parking space that's dedicated to the duplexes within the duplex complex, if you will.
I believe I have a count of guest spaces estimated in here as well, so I can pull that out if you're curious.
So is the thought then there's room for one vehicle to be parked up against, so one vehicle in the garage?
Correct.
And then one vehicle outside the garage up against the garage door?
Yeah.
And that vehicle would not then exceed what you'd consider like the right-of-way?
Correct.
Yep. Yeah, and this is just an alley right-of-way, so it's, I believe, 20 feet wide. So not a full two-way street dimension, but something small, because, theoretically, people would just be pulling in here, pulling into the garage. It's not going to be constant traffic.
More similar to a lane in a parking lot.
And we don't show a dimension on here, but I'm pretty sure the dimension between buildings is 60 feet.
Yeah, we have a minimum, I believe, of 60.
So that would be room for an average length car at each A unit?
Yep. It would give 20 feet outside of either garage and 20 feet down the center.
Correct. So is that's the distance, so 20 feet for traffic in either direction, and then a 20-foot for each car?
Yep. And so, our regular striped parking spaces are also 20 feet long, for reference.
And is that a through alley, or is it dead-ended there?
That's dead-ending there at the park here.
So
This little stub here is to allow people here to be able to pull out and down.
literally, so you're pulling in, and if you're in that last spot, the farthest spot in, you pull in.
Yep, we call it a hammerhead dead-end lot.
So then someone would back into that hammer-headed spot?
To pull out, to be able to pull out of the alley forward, going and drive.
Or so I'm a guest, and I'm at that last unit, and then I pulled in, and to leave, I would back into that.
Yep, that's what it's there for.
Hopefully you don't get down there and there's somebody parked on either side of the
cars, and you're going to have to back up.
Now you're headed to the...
So
do a 3-point turn.
Now you're backing all the way up.
So to Michael's point, I'm sure it's be very interesting during the holidays or high traffic areas like that. So a comment to Larry is I like the idea of if you can give up a parking space at the parallel and then spread those out,
The parallel parking dimensions, so
Yeah.
along the boulevard here,
Yeah.
you're talking?
Yeah, or I guess anywhere where there's parallel. If you put it that way on the boulevard, would you then adjust anywhere in the complex to be the same?
This would not.
Yeah, that's not parallel.
It would
Correct.
be perpendicular.
Correct.
It would look just like this.
Correct.
But on the street here, at the very bottom of the
think he's
sheet, that's
referring-
all parallel parking, and it's not designated parking.
Right,
It's not striped.
So where it is striped, whether it's on the boulevard at your entrance or the mixed-use street right-of-way, would
Yeah.
those, if you changed it in one, you change it everywhere there was parallel striping?
Yes.
Yep, we would change the requirement from 22 to 23 feet.
And they may be able to be 24. You'll have to work the math out.
Since we're talking about the residential street, you have a page, I think it's page 6, where you've got all your different streets and your dimensions. And I wondered if we could look at that residential street, because that one, like you say, is really tight, and I just want to kind of call attention to it, make sure it really does work. All the others I can see they're a little wider. You've got a 15-foot lane, parallel parking, and on the residential streets, if I'm reading that one right, it sounds like the width of the street is no longer 20 feet, but it's 16 feet with parallel parking on either side. So each lane now is just 8 feet wide. And it's the residential street, not the boulevard. Let's see. It should be on that sheet.
So, right. This is envisioned as a very narrow, traditional residential street that would have parking allowed on both sides.
Sure.
But it wouldn't necessarily always have cars all the way down the street. And then there are times when you may have to slow down and cars would have to maneuver around each other. It would be it'd be very easy to go fast down the street.
Well, and again, I think the fire marshal will give you an opinion whether you're going to get it on both sides, but you're not using the street parking to accomplish 2 parking spots per home. You're accommodating it in their garage and or driveways.
Correct.
So the street parking is if you own more than 2 cars.
That's for overflow purposes, right?
Which a lot of these homes, that's not your client.
No, it's just kind of party time.
But it's going to be when you have events and parties. But we do have a subdivision in Hartland right now that is only permitted to park on one side of the street by fire ordinance, and that would be Autumn Woods. Yeah. So I'll be anxious to see on the width of your streets how he reacts to parking on 2 sides.
Yeah, because, in the wintertime, we have a snow situation, and all of a sudden that width, we don't have that width anymore. I know in Howell, they narrowed their streets, and now they're going back and widening them because it didn't work. Just a comment. All the others seem to work, but this one's especially tight.
And Autumn Woods is tight.
Yeah.
You get in there, and it's even when they have cars parked on the
one side.
It's tight. I'm almost reluctant to even see if you could get a truck through there, a fire truck.
Well, and I think the signs on the street say no parking by order of fire marshal or something. So it's tagged. So you may want to take the offensive on that and give them a call rather than wait for the review letter.
I will also say that this is another thing that hasn't changed since the 2007.
Yep.
I know it's different 10 years later, so we'll see if it applies.
Same fire marshal, I believe. Tom?
Yeah, so I had a question regarding, that brings up an interesting point by Sue, is snow removal. So where is the snow stored or moved to?
More than likely is going to have to be removed from the site, but it's not much different than other communities that you see where it's got to be pushed into some location scattered around the site.
Right. Well, they're private streets, homeowners associations, as you explained in the last meeting.
Right.
So it will be the cost of the resident.
And in most cases like that, at least from what I've seen, they're not doing any snow removal anyway.
So is there inevitably any verbiage on where the snow can be put? So it's people, they're not driving up onto lawns and piling up snow high, so then you have a safety issue because you can't, we have big snow events here. And so if the snow is piled very high, now that's maybe a safety issue of traveling through. I'm just curious if that's addressed in any way.
Well, that'd be addressed in the condominium dialogue. There's going to be multiple, from the previous discussion, there are going to be multiple condominium documents for each of these types of uses. All that is addressed in the condominium documents. Places like Autumn Woods, Cobblestone, Mill Point, all have that addressed as part of their bylaws and master deed on how they deal with the maintenance and things like that. It's really up to the homeowners associations and owners associations. There are other areas in here, like park areas, where most likely if there's a big concern about snow, where it would be piled. I mean, you and I live on different, they pile it down by my house. So,
Well, and this is not something we're used to, but we did, we have approved, we've got the new condominium project between San Marino and Autumn Woods. I believe they have 5 feet between the street and the sidewalk. They have 8.5. So we do know that the snow gets plowed over the road and gets on the sidewalk, and everybody's had that big heap at the end of their driveway.
well, we also have over here, we got, I guess it'd be back here, Hartland Road, we got Woodcliff and
Oh, the condominium.
the condominiums there. They're all attached condominiums.
So that's very interesting there to talk at that for a moment, is when we talked had this other project, you talked about this under construction now. I think he has sidewalks on one side of that street.
Yep.
And are they right at the gutter, or are they in?
5 feet.
5 feet. We
made him move them in.
Right. So I haven't looked at where they're located here, but this development you're talking about, Joe, off Hartland Road, I spent some time driving through there, and it appeared to me what was happening is because there's the road, there's the gutter, and there's a walkway, a sidewalk combination, and that the truck drivers, when they were plowing snow, would put their tires on top of the walkway, and they just plowed the whole thing, and it probably was pleasant for a while, but they just replaced all those sidewalks. And where they went over sewers, I don't know how they dealt with that, because the construction of a sidewalk and that gravel is not meant for a load of a car. So just a comment that...
And I think that's why when we talked about the development up on 59, we had them, they came in with the plan that the sidewalk would be up against the road, like Woodcliff.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, nah, we recognize what you brought up, or what you brought. You might have even brought that issue up.
I did.
At that time. So I
think you visited it.
I did, yeah.
Well, there are 8.5 feet. My comment to it would be, again, it's not something I'm used to. I mean, we don't have sidewalks where I live. I mean, so most of Hartland does not. They're not what we're used to.
Right.
But the city of Brighton, the city of Howell, all of those have sidewalks, and their sidewalks are typically very close to the street. And I believe the township has a shoveling your sidewalk ordinance. So,
yeah, 5 feet is plenty of space,
Yeah.
For this, in my opinion.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Sue, are you okay with the road width and just the comment? We'll see.
Someone else is going to look at it too.
Right.
So I just wanted to note that all the others seem fine, but that one I know gets pretty tight.
Okay. How about our stacking spaces, Greg?
So the ordinance would require 10 by 22 with a 12-foot aisle. They're proposing, and again, this is for drive-through stacking, 9 by 18 with no aisle width specified.
Comments, what he's referring to on the aisles, we have that bypass lane that we see in a lot of drive-throughs now. So if you get in line and the line's too long and you want out, you're not trapped.
Is there a reason why 9 by 18, is 9 by 18 acceptable, or has there been any comments on that?
Well, it probably has fallen, I don't know, closer to a parking space.
It's just, how comfortable are you that people are going to, get up that tight and you're going to have enough room for your facility? I mean, we're really not at that scale of design here to have a concept of both, how far back the cars are going to queue and where that's going to be. But, the idea of the larger space is that they don't butt up right, like bumper to bumper.
I will
to hang back.
Right, and I will say that in that stacking space, we've had a lot of applicants that have been hesitant on it. And I bring up the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the Taco Bell, the redo of McDonald's, and the do-it-yourself car wash. We allowed all 4 of those businesses to provide documentation that said they didn't need that much. And so we reduced all 4 of those, if you recall. So
I think when you
what do you see in other communities?
I was going to say, I think when you have an ability to escape right? You know,
Yeah.
that makes it less likely that they're going to like hang back and, you know, hedge their bets on whether or not they want to get in line, right?
Right.
And so that helps, and that allows it to be smaller. I guess my advice would be hold the line on the escape lane, but you can probably do something smaller on the stack.
Okay. We'll also permit, as I just said, the last 4 drive-throughs have all been granted variances from the ordinance because our ordinance was stricter than what the industry is seeing. Greg, comments on parking comments in addition?
So the first one I think you've already discussed, you know, the areas and their proximity to the public streets. I will note that the applicant is requesting a reduction in the amount of total parking as is allowed when it's being provided for collectively for multiple uses. So you have the authority to grant that, and they are asking for that. Then our other comment was related to the trash enclosure locations for certain of the commercial buildings. Again, I don't know if you want to get into that scale of discussion right now, but it seemed, you know, as we marked them all out, it seemed like they're going to be kind of far away from buildings number 1, and then which is on the north side, and then 14 through 16, which are on the south side. If those are any kind of food service establishments, they're not walking all the way across the parking lot to throw their trash in the dumpster. And so then what you're going to get is when the site plan comes in, you're going to get now another dumpster enclosure that you hadn't planned for.
Well, if not planned for, but still required to meet the standard.
Well, that they're going to need.
Correct.
You know, that they're going to demand for their use, and it hasn't been accommodated in this layout. So I think, you know, now would be the time to think about whether or not there should be other locations, which then may remove parking spaces, and those have to go somewhere else.
Well, I know Commissioner Voigt sent me an email. He couldn't be here tonight, and that was one of his comments, just a concern on potential uses and location of trash receptacles as to whether it was practical to think that a Starbucks coffee that the employee's going to want to walk 300-400 feet across the parking lot to throw out a bag of trash.
Right.
Yeah, it was a little difficult to place these without knowing what exactly the businesses would turn out to be.
Correct.
We felt that in final design they'd probably put them where they really needed to be, but we're trying to encourage more shared use of the dumpsters so that there's not as many of them and that they would be emptied more frequently. That was the design intent.
And I would think as long as you're meeting our zoning ordinance for the dumpster enclosure, which would be, you know, brick material versus a masonry block material, and the fences and the screening, you know, the landscaping, that would probably help you when you bring in an applicant that needs another dumpster. I agree with what Greg's saying, but to go around and just start dropping them in now would be just as bad as not putting them on now. What Greg is saying is very true. You're probably going to come in when you get a use that needs a dumpster and tell us this is where we need to put it.
Right.
And we're going to wipe out 3 parking places because of it.
Yeah, most of those wipe out parking places now, so, you know, it's kind of a trade-off.
It could be a
Move them
trade.
closer to the building, then those parking spaces will move farther away from the building, so.
Comments on trash enclosures? Exciting topic.
Is it a common practice for businesses to share the trash enclosures?
I'm not sure that it's common practice, but this isn't really a typical development. You know, we're trying to encourage something a little bit better.
Some of the enclosures can hold 2 cans also, so you get 2 businesses out of one enclosure. As a matter of fact, that one right there in front of 10 looks like that possibly.
That's how we've drawn them all, is with 2.
Yeah.
So I guess my question, I want to go back to the part about the parking. For sure, we don't want parking lots that are just, you know, paved and we don't use the spaces. I guess a lot of times when you share the parking, it's for people that have nighttime use and day, so you can have that overlap. It seems like the uses right now all might be running at the same time. So I'm just trying to understand your rationale for 25% less parking if it works? How come you thought you need the less? Is our ordinance have too much for the uses you're thinking? Because I feel like they're kind of all going on at the same time.
Well, we talked a lot about this in the pre-review meetings.
Okay.
And, I mean, most of the buildings on this plan, we don't know what they would be at this point. So it's, very possible that they could be running at different times. And we also talked in the pre-review meetings that if we could show that what eventually does come in doesn't need as much parking as we're showing, then maybe that could be reduced and held as like a reserve parking area that's not yet paved.
Yeah, their risk in what's going on is that when they bring a business to town, there's an application that they apply for at the planning department, a business compliance certificate. And the planning department will go through the development and they will check on a number of boxes, and one of them will be whether there's enough parking.
Right.
Now, we've encouraged less parking because, as we see, most of our parking lots, excluding one with a very popular dinner time restaurant, has usually got space available.
Right.
But you don't know. They can go in and build all these parking lots and then no one ever park in them. And then all we've done is created a lot of runoff and a lot of unattractive asphalt that's black that turns gray.
Well, and I think the other thought was, again, kind of to the walkable community, that the businesses that are here are primarily going to be used by the residents that are here. There will be people that will come in from off-site, but most of what's going to be going on within the business is going to be walked to from the, potentially from the residences.
And so that being so new to us, is that your experience?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I can say I live in an apartment complex right near a mixed-use development like this that has a grocery store and a Domino's Pizza, and I'm constantly walking over to it because it's easier. I don't have to get in my car and drive to it. I just walk, pick up pizza, pick up groceries, go back to my house, and it allows our family to have less cars. So
some of that's weather dependent, obviously. If you got, a foot of snow on the ground and it's not plowed, kind of to the discussion that we had earlier, you're really going to walk. But for the most part, yes, it is common in this type of community.
And quite frankly, what the public is saying, this parcel of land isn't that big to put this many people on it. There isn't far to walk from one end to the other. Most of their density in their A and that B type unit are all sitting right on top of that, right behind that commercial on the south side. The north side not so much, but the south side. I would support the reduction in the parking because I don't like big parking lots. Very rarely do you see a parking lot so full that there isn't a space available, other than, I said, that one shopping center in town, which is being corrected for all of those that don't know with the Speedway expansion.
Correct. I was going to say, we are correcting.
Yeah, they're gaining an additional 50 parking places.
So, on that note, in Howell, where you have your development, now I don't know that you planned that or you added into it.
Yeah, we didn't plan it. We inherited it. There isn't a lot of retail in that community, if that's kind of where you're going with it. There is some space that's allocated to retail up front, but that community failed back when it was originally started, and some of the retail that was there has since pulled out. Now there's starting to become an influx of retail coming back into the community because obviously we've had some success in terms of sales and construction in there. So I think it's just a matter of time before those buildings get filled back in, and that's very much what the residents do in that community is walk to those shops that are there currently.
The plat that you're showing us here, does that already assume a 25% reduction?
So are you all right with it then?
Can I ask a question? A couple members have commented that they are in favor of, in support of a reduction by 25%. Earlier tonight, we were talking about parallel parking spaces and even eliminating an unknown and undetermined number of parallel parking spaces. I don't know off the top of my head what that will do to this type of a calculation, but am I correct to assume here that those members that are in support of this reduction would also be in support of that reduction of those parallel spaces, which, I don't know, maybe it moves us to a greater number percent. I'm just not sure if, when there's support of the reduction, are you aware that we've also asked the applicant to further reduce the parking beyond what's shown here?
Well,
My answer is yes, but
I think it's yes, but again, we're asking them to go back and redraw a number of different things. They may find that the reduction remains consistent with what they're proposing.
Well, I guess the thoughts are, let's say we say tonight, or you, not so much me, that you are in support of reducing it by 25%, and when they go back and calculate how much parking has been lost through the parallel parking, it drops to it's a reduction by 26%. I just didn't want that to be a question that, wait a minute, at that planning commission meeting, they only granted him to be reduced by 25%. That was not specifically talked.
Here's how I see it going. I think we can go up to 25%. So if it ends up being 26, we're going to probably have to go back and look at your parallel parking spots.
Okay.
And I can say the parallel parking spots were part of that whole calculation. So I think that you're right in bringing that up, that it probably would affect our calculations. And instead of deleting one parking space and just stretching them out, I probably just have to stretch the entire thing out and remove some landscaping. That's really what it would come down to make that 25% calculation work out.
Yeah, I think you need to be to the 25% because I don't think we're going to go over that.
Okay.
But that is a good point.
Okay.
Well, I assumed that your reference to 25% reduction was specific to the commercial area, not assuming that you're going to go around the residential streets and count those as well.
Right. So the calculations only took into account the striped parking spaces, which were the ones that were designated for the commercial area. So you're right, it does not take into account the residential parking at all. It's just the commercial parking, I think, that we're referencing here.
But when we speak of parallel parking, we're talking on the boulevard.
Right.
And are we also talking the
I think we were talking
between the residential and the commercial?
The commercial and the mixed use, I think, is what we were referring to, which is on the north side is that mixed use right-of-way boulevard there.
So when we calculate the parking, we're only allowed to, I'm sorry, my laser pointer isn't working. The only spaces that were taken into account in the calculations for that area were the ones that you didn't have to cross the street to get to. So I would still think that we would stretch these spaces out, as you said. If they're the 22 feet, or 22 feet, then they're too small. So I'd make all of them 23 feet, and then we probably lose a space or two in the calculations for the commercial area, which would then have to be offset by removing landscaping to get back to that 25% reduction.
But the residential ones were not calculated in that count.
Yes.
Anything on the single family, the duplex, and the cluster was not counted because they're not striped.
So it wouldn't be affected because then you can make that parking space however large you want.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Anything in driveways and things like that are not counted, and any of the streets that were wide enough to park on each side but not striped, none of that was counted.
Well, the reason I asked was I went through the north parcel, and it appears that based upon your presumption for square footage for the commercial use, your parking is really very, very close. I mean, you're not off by 25% by any means. So that precipitated me to be concerned when you said a reduction of 25%. Where was that 25% coming from?
Well, the thing to watch on their calculation, probably they have a general number they're using when they bring in on that business compliance certificate a restaurant, like let's pick a Tim Hortons again, even though we have one at Tim Hortons and they've got seats in there and all that, the calculations are different. And so the use requires more seats than if they bring in like a dry cleaner. That calculation is a little different. So I'm not sure what number you used. It was probably a average commercial number that we have in the ordinance, because we have every use lined up, and then we have the parking calculation to it, and I'm thinking you used the average.
Yes, so the ones that we sort of knew a little bit more what the use might be, we used those actual calculations from the ordinance, and then the general more mixed-use buildings, we use one space per 200 usable square feet.
And that's what I got.
And where they could run into an issue will be if they take and fill buildings 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 with sit-down restaurants. They don't have enough parking.
Right.
We don't even need to do the calculation.
Yeah.
But it's unlikely that's going to happen.
I agree.
Right.
It's also limited in our use chart that you can only have X
Certain number of
restaurants just for that reason.
Yeah.
So
We run into that with our strip centers right now. The uses, they have to go through a calculation every time a new tenant comes in to verify that that parking lot will hold the current uses plus the proposed new business. So it's a regular calculation done around here.
So I don't want you to have to repeat again, but just to clarify, in that area of 14, 15, 16, the commercial, and then B across the street, which is multifamily, you don't expect customers of the commercial to cross the street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So that means then that parallel parking in front of Unit B, which is for multifamily, were those calculated? So now it's different because now that building has some parallel parking out in front of it, and now you have the alley. So in that alley behind B, you still have room for a car in the garage and a car outside of it. So does B just have kind of some extra spots, maybe in that vicinity? Okay.
Yep.
That'll be the holiday parking.
Right.
People will be charging for
Party.
that.
Okay. Any more questions on parking? Craig, do you have anything to add to parking?
No, nothing else.
Okay. How about landscaping?
So for landscaping, I think it's most useful to go to the charts that are on 8D and 8E to start with, anyway. That's at least how I started. So that's where I'm going to go. And so what your ordinance requires is there are minimum standards which are set forth in section 5.11, and then there is to be an additional 25% of general landscaping that can be spread about through various categories that would otherwise be provided for. And then an exceptional standard that would constitute a substantial benefit for the PUD or PD. And so what they've represented to you is that they have accomplished that they have an exceptional amount of landscaping. So what we did is we tried to go through and look at it category by category. And as you see in our chart there then, I'm interested to hear what they say about this. Maybe I'm not reading their chart correctly, but what our chart seems to suggest is that while overall they have more, they don't have more in every category of things. And so, for example, on the north parcel, they got a lot of small shrubs, but they don't have so many medium and large shrubs. They got extra evergreen trees, but they're not required to have any evergreen trees. It's certainly great that they have them. They don't have as many ornamental trees. And so I think that discussion needs to be had about, whether it's the total or whether it's compliance with each category that's specified in the ordinance. And then I also just didn't understand their column that was entitled Newberry Place PD requirement, because it seemed to set up a standard that then was not met in every case, and so perhaps they can explain that for us as well.
We'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so the intent of this regulating plan is actually that the regulations would be set forth on sheet 7, which is landscape regulations, and that spells out, what you have to have according to this PD. At one of the pre-review meetings, it was suggested that we try to find a way to show you that this was greater than the requirements in the township. So that's what this chart came about, which was a beast to try to organize in some fashion. I'm not sure if we really succeeded in that. But the center 2 pounds, one that says township ordinance requirements, this is sort of if we had to follow the township's ordinance requirements as written, how many plants would be required in this fictional plan. And then if we applied the landscape regulations that we are proposing, which sometimes vary, sometimes are greater than the township requirements, what would those numbers be? So that's what those 2 center columns are. And then the last set of columns is what landscape would we be providing on this plan as we have it drawn. The thing that is not shown in this chart at this time is the number of plants that would be in the parking lots, which A, we're very much in flux, and B, there's a lot of different things you can do in those parking lot plantings. So I do have the number of square feet that we've required and provided, which number 1, we've required twice as much landscape area in the parking lots as the township ordinance. And number 2, we've actually on our plan shown even greater than that due to the number of parking lot islands you have to have in a well-designed parking lot. So when I ran some numbers today to try to figure out how many plants that would be, it would add another 414 medium shrubs on the north and 906 on the south. So, I guess I wouldn't want you to 100% evaluate this PD on just the number of plants in this chart, because that, at a final level, we would actually know where the doors and the windows are of the building architecture, and the plantings would, correspond with that building architecture. So this chart is doing our best to try to guess how many plants, based on these requirements, calculate out how many plants we would have if we followed our requirements. And I guess when I was doing this, I tried to mark down for you where we either met the requirements or whether we exceeded the requirements in this last notes column. So, like you're saying, we might have shown more small shrubs, more medium shrubs than the township ordinance, but overall, I feel like the effect exceeds the township requirements. So I was a little drawn out. So if you need me to go back over something, please ask questions.
So would it be fair to say that the landscape, I think you used the word fiction, so the landscape provided is actually a fiction?
Correct, because we are trying to set forth regulations of what this would be held to and show you how we would apply that in the conceptual layout. And a lot of the things are pretty set, like the landscape along the road, that has very specific requirements, numbers of plants per lineal foot, and we require them to be, have a design to them, not just, equally spaced plants along the entire length of the road. So some of these things are more set than others. But you're right in saying that what you see on the plan is fictional, but you can see on the plan that we have just a tremendous amount of landscape shown on this plan. It was honestly difficult to fit any more trees and shrubs in this plan. I really feel like you've provided an exceptional level of landscaping here.
So would it perhaps behoove us, I know you worked a lot on it, but like the landscape provided chart, does it really add anything to this plan at this, as it functions as basically a regulating plan? Isn't what we really want to know what's required?
You're right.
Ultimately.
You're right. And so that's why in the column, I've tried to show you how our requirements exceed or meet the township standards, not just what is actually drawn on the fictional plan. So that's how you can go through and kind of compare the township ordinance requirement to the Newberry Place PD requirement and decide whether you feel like that's adequate or not.
Greg, are you asking for something more along the lines of the chart that you did in your...
Well, my chart is evaluating provided versus required. And what I hear you saying now, which I didn't, I guess, fully understand in interpreting it, is that provided is just, this concept drawing, and it's not the standard to which you want to hold yourselves.
We would say
But the standard you want to hold yourselves to is the PD, the Newberry Place PD requirement. And so if that's so, and if this is a regulating plan, then the other doesn't have a purpose in my estimation at this. What you really want to know is what the standard is going to be going forward, and when we evaluate those final plans,
but I think
will it meet them?
Yeah, but I think what they're saying is they've got the standard on the piece of paper. They took the standard and drew the circles on the plan that would represent what the standard is saying. And since the plan does have a certain amount of fictionality to it, not a word, but there are a lot of things that are going to change. You're going to apply those standards. If we take this plan and apply this standard, that's the landscaping you're going to get. Is that what you're saying?
That is what I'm saying, yes. And I will say that though the plan is somewhat fictional, it doesn't, I feel like the way we've drawn the landscape plans are still trying to regulate some level of design, some level of thought that has to go into it. We've provided landscape character statements as well as numbers of landscape. So what's on the plan is what we would expect, the type of planting design that we would expect to see.
For me, what I would need to know, I look at that plan and see a lot of plants. Okay, I would need to know that the words that you wrote correlate to exactly the circles, the plants I see. That would be one for me. Then two would be, are we following our recommended plant material list in what is defined as a small, a medium shrub, an ornamental tree, a shade tree, so that we make sure our plant materials are acceptable. So that your idea of a medium shrub isn't what we call a small shrub.
I do believe that in our landscape requirements, we said that the plant material requirements have to meet the township.
The township. And for the public's benefit, all of this stuff does. Anything that's not covered in here defers to the township ordinance. So there are some things like lighting and those types of things that we haven't talked about that will automatically defer to the township ordinance. But Greg is... Are they accomplishing at least what I'm looking for? I haven't heard from anybody else yet.
Well, so then what I would say is what's drawn, and apparently it doesn't take account of the interior parking lot landscaping, if I'm understanding their remarks correctly. But what is represented on the chart as having been drawn does not exceed your requirements in every category. It does in many categories, but not in every category. And so what I hear tonight is that they intend to, but what's drawn doesn't necessarily represent that.
What I heard, or maybe what I want to hear, is that I don't know for me if the individual plant count is as important as what the overall design is. Because if it takes you more medium shrubs to get us the look, then I would rather be heavy on medium shrubs and light on small.
Right.
And medium and small is not just referencing size, it's the type of plant that it is for the public's benefit. It's not just the size of the plant that goes in the ground. You're the landscape architect. What do you think? Go for it.
Well, I agree. I mean, it's very heavily landscaped. We've been talking small scale all night long, so sometimes the small bushes are all that's going to fit, like a lot of boxwood, little things. We're in tight spaces. You've really beefed up the number of canopy trees. Part of the TND is you want to have a canopy-lined street. You don't want little trees. That's why those are higher. So what you're trying to do is apply your landscape to the design of the character. We've got some evergreen trees that we didn't even need to have, and I know everyone here is happy about that. Things that I did look at was also, meeting the township requirements, and I keep talking about the perimeter. So an example would be screening the parking along M59. We're going to look at a section, but we got to have screening that would be permanent all year long. And right now, your plan, that LAR strip, as I mentioned earlier tonight, doesn't incorporate all evergreen.
Are you looking for something that obscures the view pretty uniformly?
That's how the way our ordinance talks about for the parking. It has to be 3-foot height, evergreen, hedge, or a wall, or something to obscure those vehicles. So I think you can look at that strip and kind of look at our ordinance, but I know that's one of the things we're going to really want to do. You've got plenty of material out there. We just need to change it a bit so it's a constant screen all year long.
Okay. So I guess I was interpreting that parking lot screening requirement to be in places like along our internal roads. Because along M59, there's the LAR requirement.
That's right. And
so you're saying we should have the LAR plus the...
No, if you look at your LAR requirement, we can look at what your verbiage is. If I read it correctly, it talks about kind of a mix of some ornamental grasses and some perennials. What we have to at least have is a constant, at least a screen that's evergreen. And I don't think your LAR mix does that.
Right. So, yeah, the way we have it, we have the required numbers of shrubs.
Yes.
But I think we maybe grouped them more than maybe you'd like to see.
And you can certainly do it, but let's just say that, like, you layer it, okay? We've done that with others, and so at least you still have the backbone that is at least a constant screen. Then you can do accent groupings, too, but we at least have to have a consistent screen.
Okay.
Okay? Because, it'd be monochromatic, it'd be yuck, right? Just a solid screen, so then you can also add some groupings, get some three-dimension, that kind of thing.
Do you mind if we look at this a little bit more specifically? I'd like to just
let's
get your
zero
feedback.
in on that, because I think you have a blow-up of it.
We do, yes. Just so I make sure that we get this right. It must be an 8A, the only page I'm not looking at.
I'd open my plans, but they're so big. Yeah, that's good. And then I think you have verbiage, too, that describes that somewhere.
Okay, so we have the trees. So we have canopy trees, and then evergreen trees, canopy trees, and then in between those we have our required numbers of shrubs.
Sure.
And then in between this, it would be supplemented with the grasses, perennials, etc.
Right.
So then, but maybe instead what you're saying is make sure to have a consistent screen all the way across that's layered in some design fashion with those other plants.
Sure.
That would be more plants than is actually required by the LAR.
You could swap out, so that area in between, underneath your canopy trees, right now where you've got that mix of perennials, grasses, whatever.
Yeah.
Just exchange some so that your perennials, grasses, whatever, let's say that the back edge closest to the cars is just a solid evergreen hedge. In front of them, you can have a little lower perennials, groupings, whatever, but at least get a consistent screen.
Okay.
But you don't need more, just kind of reorganize.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's kind of my comment on that. Everywhere else, it looks like, you far exceeded. You deferred, like in your detention at first. I didn't see any verbiage there, but then on that, you said you're going to conform for the detention plannings for the ordinance. So you didn't really do a detail for that. It looked like things were covered. The only thing that I was a little bit confused on was you had commented about on residential when they have a patio, like it was like on sheet 7, when they've got a patio area, those areas, if they were like fronted onto a street, you needed to provide a screen between a privacy screen. And that I wasn't sure how you were going to do it.
So if we go to, we have a landscape enlargement. If you go to sheet 8C.
Okay.
Okay, so this is where we tried to show in greater detail how all of these concepts would be laid out.
Yes.
So that was in this location here where we had a duplex And instead of all along in between the buildings, we were placing the plants in between the buildings to create that a screen. Instead of having the plants up along the foundation of the buildings, we pulled them back, which we felt provided more, a little bit more walking space in between the building, and then made those plants more useful.
That all looked good, but if we look at, let's just say, the ends of those duplexes facing the street, that was the part I was reading. I think those are patios. Are they between the duplex and the sidewalk?
That's a porch.
Porch? Okay. That's what I wasn't sure what those were, and I didn't know if that was where you had some verbiage somewhere that said you needed to have a privacy screen, and you illustrated like maybe landscape or what, and I'm thinking, well, you're not going to want something so tall.
Was it the duplex or the cluster home?
I don't think that's where we intended that.
Okay.
We would not, the intent would be we would not have any patios in front of the homes along the street.
I think I found the words you're looking for. We were describing the duplex foundation plantings. So we said foundation plantings at duplex units are intended to provide traditional foundation planting along the street view at the front doors. And then between the units, due to the small setbacks intended for this product, the foundation planting requirement shall be used to provide a privacy between the units instead of lining the base of the buildings. So that's what that was.
Yeah.
What that was coming from, not from the front of the buildings, but from the side.
Okay. And then just later, because I don't want to tie everybody up, just look on your sheet 7, and there's a section under residential A, and just kind of look at the verbiage. What it said there was, it says, where patio areas front onto a street, a privacy screen shall be provided. Maybe that's just a cleanup thing, but I couldn't find where those were, and I just wanted to understand it because things are so tight.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, gosh, if we have a privacy screen, that's going to be kind of tall, a little bit of a brush. You're not going to want to see that right next to the street. Just look at that. And
sure. Yeah, I think I thought you were talking about something else.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of
words in this.
Yes. Okay, so that helps. I was just trying to clarify that.
Okay.
Can we talk about the landscaping against the existing single-family on Fenton Road and Deer Path? Could we pull that up? What do we have going on there?
Right there,
Let's talk Deer Path first. Let's just stay on one at a time.
So those are tightly spaced evergreen trees providing a landscape screen.
Are they staggered?
Yes, they're staggered.
Multiple row?
It's 2 rows that are staggered.
How big do you think they are? Do we have a height on them?
I believe there's minimum height requirements at planting. I want to say it's 8 feet.
It's 8 feet. And I think you have a section through there, too. That would help, too, to look so you could see the stagger.
We could look at the landscape zoning ordinance when you guys get back to your office. Just take a look at the page that addresses the screening and using of the evergreens and the staggered and the varied heights.
I believe we looked at that when we were creating this.
Okay.
Varied heights, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, I think we'd probably be looking for a mix of 8, 10, 12s. It looks a little more natural.
Okay.
And if you put them in the right sequence, it'll provide a barrier much faster.
Okay.
And I think we have a graphic in there.
Okay.
What are the circles? Not those right there. What is all that?
Those are canopy trees. So we intended to provide the landscape screen between where these cluster homes were getting really close to the existing residences. And then everywhere else we provided our green belt, what is that? Green belt landscape, which is canopy trees, which we intended that to then become more of a usable space that you could walk amongst those trees. We felt that the evergreen screen wasn't needed there between the park and the single-family residences.
And right now the play structure is there, and there's a possibility that may or may not be there. So if that leaves, do you just envision just an open green space, walkway, trees, whatever?
And more than likely the play space gets moved into Heritage Park.
Okay.
On that note, last week we discussed your park areas, that maybe making a green belt or the green belt you have along, connecting the park at this end to the park at the other end, south end, or I guess it would be east and west end. So, and if there's a path there, does that then change that planting of those evergreens and move it towards, I don't know if it can be moved or if there can be some shape put in it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, if you've considered that.
Are you saying that, is it because you wouldn't want the path to just be a straight path? Or?
Well, it might be nice to not have a straight path, but is there enough room for a path there between the back of those
I do think there is
cluster homes and the...
path, yes. I mean, yeah, I would say that there is.
And I think it could meander instead of being a straight path as well.
It seems there would be more character in something meandering, and then I don't know if your tree, if the trees can follow it, but just, okay, so you have considered that. It was last week's meeting. Okay.
We definitely would still want to be able to provide that landscape screen, though.
Some of that, if you look at the grading plan, is going to be sloped, so we would have to make sure that the path is at the toe of the slope, whereas right now the sloping area is up against the property line, which is where the trees would be planted.
What's the diameter of a 12-foot evergreen?
I think they might be drawn as 12s.
If you check our ordinance, we've got a actual graphic there on the how to create the evergreen screen. I think they're 15 foot on center or something.
I'm just wondering if 2 rows of them fit within 25 feet, and therefore there's enough room left for the path. That's my point.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, so whenever you plant evergreens, even with everyone's best intentions, they always grow together. So that, I don't know if an evergreen can be chosen as a slower grower, or maybe they grow more vertical.
I think the neighbors would want faster.
Yeah, well, maybe not slower, but maybe diameter-wise, because there are evergreens that are thinner and taller, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we have requirements for the plants must grow together and provide a full screen within a certain amount of time frame, and it's just a few years.
Right.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
So just take a look at that and use that as a guide, maybe. You guys have any more deer path comments? We need to look at the Fenton Road existing residential screening. I think you had a cutaway on this one the other day. And what plant materials are you proposing?
That is also an evergreen screen there, similar to the north side.
Are you talking
that looks a little
there
different.
Or
yeah, well, what will the 4 or 5 residences on Fenton Road be looking at when they sit on their patio?
Well, these are evergreen trees in 2 staggered rows, just the same as these. It's just the space is a little bit looser. We have a little bit more space there, so you can kind of see the circle a little bit better. And then this here is a canopy tree in the backyards.
Okay.
And then these are some ornamental trees and shrubs in between the duplex units. So there's a fair number of trees that they're going to be looking at there.
That's a much bigger slope along that property line, so there was no intent there to do any sort of walk or anything like that.
Right. Now, are your trees up at the top then? Because your site is lower than the neighbors.
It'll be spread along the slope.
There's a section 8B.
Can you pull that one up, 8B?
I can try. I'm learning here how to.
There you go.
Oh, you're getting there.
So it's the section
Yeah,
one
scroll
more
down a little. Right
These
there.
property lines. So here we have where we cut that section. There's the existing home, and then here's the slope with the evergreen trees on it. And then here, and then these are intended to show you, how big the trees would get over time.
Yeah.
So
How long's time? How long would you guess is time?
I mean, it could be a couple of. I mean, these trees at mature height, 15, 20 years.
I think the evergreens grow a lot slower than the deciduous trees do.
Yeah, I'll defer to the zoning ordinance because I'm pretty comfortable with the screening requirements. If you guys could take a look at that for this strip also on the next presentation. I know we covered it well in that, and it's just probably best to go back at what we already know.
And we were attempting to meet those requirements.
Yeah.
With what we currently have in the plans.
Yep. Any other questions on landscaping? I have a couple notes that I found in the print that I wanted to ask about, but did anybody else have any other questions or comments on that at this time? Now, if you would just check your notes, page 7, there's a note E. I think we should be requiring underground irrigation for the senior center also. I'm not sure, by the way, the statement is read or written that it would be required. E. So just take a peek at it and see if, I think it would be appropriate. You've got it pretty much everywhere else. It could have just been a miss.
Okay.
Note B, designs require approval of the ARB, usable open space landscaping. The ARB and landscaping, when you say approval, they're going to have the guidelines to follow. So what are they? Are they just making sure it meets the guidelines?
And the design aesthetic of it, you know. So that's how we make sure they're not just plunking, you know, evenly spaced plants in a row, and that it would actually meet the design intent of the plan.
Okay. This is one, it's part of the package of what you're proposing with your beautiful boulevards and your walls and all. It says in the boulevard landscape section there, it says walls and fences required as shown on the plan unless otherwise reviewed and approved by the ARB. So again, what's the ARB? What if the ARB says, well, we don't like all those brick walls, so now they go away? That wasn't what we thought we were getting. So can we work on the wording there?
In terms of the uses, what each use?
Well, I think it's talking about the boulevard, the entries. I'm having a hard time coming up with a situation where we would want them to go away.
Well, then don't allow the ARB to take them away. That would be my, real simple.
Sure. Well, couldn't we
Architectural Review Board.
Thank you. That acronym. The PD as conceptually approved by the board shall not be reduced. It could be enhanced, but it can't be reduced by what?
Yeah,
by a PD.
However you would put that wording in. I'm not
But
used to
that's basically
this.
what you're saying. They can certainly enhance it. They can.
Yes, absolutely.
But,
We've done a lot of PDs. We've never had one that has this ARB component that I haven't totally wrapped my hands around. I'm trying to figure out what this is.
I anticipate that, like homeowners association boards, they have a certain amount of discretion and what they can do. But there's also the way you write those condominium documents. There are also things that they're prohibited from doing. Like when we talked a little bit about accessory buildings, for example, where you put in your deed, there's the now, thou shalt not kind of things that you put in your condominium documents or master deeds. I mean, they can't, the ARB can't mess around with right-of-ways or utilities. Right. They can't mess around. I mean, there's certain, you got typically limited common elements and common elements, exclusive use by homeowners of certain areas, common areas that are dedicated to certain uses. I kind of think, their job is to kind of maintain the architectural integrity and what's ultimately approved by us.
Well, I agree. It's just the way some of these ARB privileges are worded.
Yeah.
The ARB, I believe, has the opportunity to reduce setbacks.
Yeah, we would not want to allow any of that. So if that's written,
I have a problem with that. That's one of the things that we
have an issue already with that. With some of the
and we're talking about. We're not familiar with these. We're trying to get comfortable with them, and we may ultimately agree with this, but yet there's this sentence in here that says the ARB can change them. Well, no, they can't.
I think those are the kinds of things we want to make sure that what the ARB is going to be allowed to do and what
their area of responsibility and authority is. So that was going to come up later. We need we understand their need to be able to have their powers, but there's just some you're not going to be able to have.
Typically, it's very minor stuff, like a homeowner wants to do a fence in their yard, and that's got to go through the ARB to be approved, and then they have a set of guidelines that they're actually approving it to.
Like, for example, chain link fences.
Well, they don't permit them.
They don't permit them. Right, that would be one of the things that the ARB would have to enforce. That's their job.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've just not had wording like this before. So, totally comfortable with you working within the guidelines we set. It's just where you're going to get your privileges to deviate. Setbacks is one kind of hard for me.
Yep.
Okay, that was all I had from the words in the landscaping section. Anybody else have anything on landscaping? Mike? Okay. Where are we, Greg?
So we had some other notes about landscaping. We wanted maintenance concept to be addressed in greater detail with respect to the landscape regulations. So your ordinance requires specific locations and dimensions of wetland areas and significant site features such as tree stands, unusual slopes, streams, and water drainage areas to be shown on the preliminary PD plan, and an environmental analysis of the project's impact is required. So they did summarize the site features on sheet 1, but the impacts have not been analyzed.
Can you guys get that taken care of? Okay.
It's more of a detail thing, but it has some relationship to where the parallel parking is shown. You know, sometimes when you have planting areas adjacent to parallel parking, that ends up not working out so well because people are trying to get out of their cars in that spot. So just give some thought to where those are in relation to parallel parking spots. It looked like maybe they did. They tried to stagger them in between spots, which would be appropriate.
Additionally, there is a 1.5 foot wide concrete band behind the curb just for that reason.
Okay. So then we suggest that there be some method of delineating crosswalks where they cross pavement, so either pavers or stamped concrete, something of that sort. You know, in these areas, and they have a notation on the plans. I don't know what exactly it's supposed to mean, but we would suggest that there be something physical there besides paint that allows you to know that that's a crosswalk.
I was going to just clarify that it was paint striping, so that's up to you, Scott, whether you're...
And you're saying that's not allowed?
Well, that's my suggestion. This is a PDD, so we're setting up the rules. My suggestion is that, paint goes away over time, but, things that are permanent, like concrete or pavers or something like that, do not. And so then it takes care of itself, and it's always there. And people know where the crosswalks are. Many communities require that in those situations. So it's something for the Planning Commission to consider.
We'll certainly have all that wrapped in.
It's in the ordinance, and it's not.
Yeah, we'll have all that wrapped into. I mean, we've got painted lines for parking and things like that. So all of that's going to have to be maintained. In our experience, things like pavers and those types of things require more maintenance, just because they move and crack and do those kinds of things, and actually cost more than painting a new line or whatever the case may be. But our intent would be to make sure that as part of the master deed that we've got all of that called out in terms of overall maintenance of all of that, the common areas and everything.
Comments?
So I would think as unique as your product is, if you had a walkway similar to that, even if it was stamped concrete, that might hold up better, that would add great character and it would really stand out as a walkway that's defined by texture also, and and the look, the obvious. So I like the idea, but if it's a maintenance issue, there's something to consider there. But maybe stamped concrete would hold up better than a paver.
I honestly, I guess it's maybe just a personal opinion of aesthetics, but I personally think that the look of stamped concrete it almost looks tacky in a crosswalk, and it's almost like you're calling attention. I think that dollars in terms of improving aesthetic character are better spent elsewhere than drawing attention to a sidewalk, a crosswalk in the road. But maybe it's just up to. So
you've never seen that? You've never seen that anywhere?
I just don't prefer the look of it. I think that if it's pavers, it can cause trippers, safety hazards like that. and the stamped concrete, the stamping wears away where the tire treads are over time, or gets stained. It's I think an aesthetic issue.
So it's not used on road surfaces generally?
If you have an asphalt road, occasionally there'll be requirements to have a concrete side. If you have an asphalt road and a concrete sidewalk going down it, which is required in some places, you have different, heaving effects with the concrete and the asphalt, and you end up having a lip where the asphalt sometimes settles, and so I think there's a lot of potential issues with changing the material in the crosswalk that we would probably want to avoid.
Most of the time where you see stamped concrete is in patios and courtyards and places like that.
So I like the paver idea, but I understand your point of it for maintenance on pavers, I think would be greater than, but maybe I have that backwards entirely. So have you seen that? Is that something?
I've seen it, in fact, required in some places. Sometimes it's even the case, and it depends on the character of the roadway, that these areas are raised, so there's great definition to them. That provides additional pedestrian safety. Now, these aren't going to be very high-speed streets, I don't assume, so I don't know if that's necessary.
We've got pavers in our town commons community right now, and they're a mess that we've inherited. So
I would like to point out that in some areas we do keep the like you're saying, the sidewalk raised as it crosses the driveway. So, and that happens mainly in mixed-use areas. So the sidewalk is held at a steady level as you're walking, in front of the building, and then as it crosses the drive approach, it makes the pedestrian more visible to the driver, and so you don't have to go down into the drive approach. It makes the pedestrian more prominent than the vehicle in that case. So we do that occasionally, but where we cross the main streets, it dips down, and it would be the painted striping on the asphalt as opposed to concrete. So it's kind of a hybrid between, I think, what you're saying, where they're raised and where they're lowered with striping, depending on the location.
We haven't done this in our residential projects, but we do over in both the Meyer and the the Walmart's project and the Kroger and Target site use the asphalt parking lot, but use the exits out of the stores to the parking lot are done in stamped concrete or colored concrete where the parking lots are asphalt. Now, you would get the heaving. I have noticed over the years, particularly the older ones, get a little chipped on the corner where the snowplow blade has hit them. But there is an application where we do that.
So I'm picturing Meyer, because I'm one of their best customers. Is it when you leave the store, is it actually take you across the street? Because I feel it on the shopping cart.
Well, that's the little warning strip to let you know you're going to step out in traffic. But if you walk right beyond that, you'll notice the concrete is colored. It's not asphalt painted.
It is colored?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of a red.
Yeah, I got it now. Yeah, see it out in front of Kroger.
They all have it. For them, it's a maintenance thing. They don't have to paint it. But as I have said, I have noticed over the years some of those corners have chipped. And I'm sure it's because the concrete's heaved differently than moved differently than the asphalt.
Yeah, concrete will crack. I mean, it'll all crack and move and do different things, but it's something we can take a look at, certainly. I mean, if we were going to do it, I would prefer to do more of a colored sort of concrete than a stamped concrete, because I think that does cause...
Is there certain ADA requirements?
Well, only in that rumble strip thing is sitting there when it comes down. My comment was going to be as a compromise. I could see it far more likely used in a commercial or mixed-use section. Mm-hmm. In a residential section, I would just put I don't think people are using the crosswalk all the time. They're going to cut across the street.
Right.
But I would see the commercial and mixed use maybe having more of that character, and maybe it's more appropriate there, and maybe traditional... I don't even know as you stripe a crosswalk in a residential neighborhood, do you? I don't think I've seen that.
Have to. I think it's a good thing to do at main crosswalks, to delineate that, make the pedestrians
Okay.
more visible. I guess, when you're walking in a downtown, though, you don't see, sidewalk concrete and then a colored concrete and, sidewalk. So, it's kind of just a very different aesthetic that doesn't really fit the sort of, traditional downtown or downtown commercial area that we're trying to promote.
Well, take a look at it, or take a trip to Brighton. I think they have stuff like that.
Okay.
Okay. Where are we, Scott, or Greg, 9?
Yeah, we're on 9.
Okay.
So these are general requirements, information requirements for the preliminary PD plan. The first is details of the facade design. So they do have a great deal of detail in terms of notes, and they have a layout sheet for each of the various types of buildings that they're proposing. My recollection was that in our preliminary meetings, we wanted to see all 4 sides of the building. I might be mistaken about that, but we don't see all 4 sides of the building in those plans, and so that was my
Is
first
there what we're trying to convey to you is that you need to set the standard by which we and everybody in this room and everybody in Hartland Township can understand that these buildings that are set out here, they really have 4 fronts. There isn't really a back, per se.
And on the mixed-use elevation, we did point out that this is the elevation that we would see on all 4 sides of the building.
Okay.
So we did specify that.
And then the other thing that we did was we actually provided a chart of the amount of types of materials by percentage that would be available on the sides. That way we could use that as a guideline once, one of those pads was sold and the architecture was designed, then we could use that as a guideline.
So are we going to be able to review these buildings with the standards that we have to understand that our sides and our backs are meeting an appropriate standard?
Well, I think you have notes that tell you what the material mix should be. You don't have elevation drawings that show you how that architecture is supposed to look. I mean, as you say, you're going to see all 4 sides of the building. Don't you want to know what else?
Didn't we look at the 07 plan and see that there were sketches and there were sides and rears?
There were sides and rears. I do remember on the commercial buildings that were in the Phase 1,
Okay.
the Kroger had all 4 sides. But that would be required, I think, for the Phase 1 developments anyway.
Right. I think what we're looking for, and maybe you can find a way to best do it, we need to know that all 4 sides of these buildings are going to look like fronts. This commercial mixed-use products that you're putting out there. If you have a way of conveying that, it's probably going to work for us.
Well, I think we've tried and a couple of times now, so not too successfully, it sounds like. I guess my understanding is that all of these will go through, anything that's not obviously in Phase 1, which is what we're trying to get approved at this point in time, is going to go through a site plan approval.
Right.
Is that correct?
That is, but we are using this plan as the standard by which we're going to review it.
Right.
Or defer to the ordinance if it's not in there. And we need to, I don't want to get in an argument with you over the fact that your backs of your buildings look like backs when, we intended those to look like fronts.
Right.
I mean, where you take those mixed-use buildings, I believe they are, and they back up to, on the south side, they back up to the multiple use, that street there. The backs of those buildings, or that side of those buildings, can't look like a back.
Right.
So we've got to make sure that we have a standard to review that they don't.
So those mixed use, so we provided elevations, and we said that all 4 sides of the building would have this type of elevation. So do you want to see essentially a copy? I mean...
Well, that's true for those particular, but for the multifamily building, I think you only got a front and a side.
So that's the residential buildings are more of a concern? We provided front and back elevations of the gas station on the north parcel, car wash on the south parcel, the restaurant and convenience store on the south parcel. So it's the residential buildings that we only provided the fronts at this point.
Right now, on the south parcel, there are no rears of the apartment buildings that back up to the property line. There's fronts and sides, which we've provided. I mean, we're not opposed to trying to define it further. I guess we're at a loss as to how to, without designing every building that's on the site.
No, you can't do that.
Right.
And we know that. Greg, what will we do to be comfortable when it comes to reviewing these buildings? That's really what it boils down to. What do we need?
Right, so hopefully my mic's still working. So, for example, on the south side, you're seeing the back, if I'm understanding this correctly, of some of the multifamily buildings there that face the multi-use commercial buildings. So, you ought to know what those look like, it seems to me. That's the one glaring example of something that hasn't been represented in elevation fashion.
So we want an elevation of the back of the multiple family?
If I were you, I would want that.
Okay.
Anything else that we'd like, Greg?
Do we have all the sides of the senior facility? Is that so?
I believe so. Sheet 14A.
Is there anything else besides that? Well, if we could go back to the senior. So that's what you've got for the senior product that's on the screen right now.
Well, and there's a sheet with elevations
I was
as
going
well.
to say, what's the next sheet there?
Yep.
Right here.
All right. Okay. So you got all four sides.
Okay.
And then the second question is, do you like all four sides, I guess? But that's a separate question of whether you got them or not. So I guess it's particularly the multifamily product that I think you ought to see the other side of.
Okay.
We've got that, so we can provide it.
So our second general comment is about making sure we understand the method of screening for rooftop and ground-mounted mechanical equipment. Obviously, I don't expect that they're going to design that, but there should be information about it.
Well, and we spent a lot of time on it at the Planning Commission, so I'll defer to the ordinance. If you pick the ordinance requirements up, you'll be fine, which is typically either a parapet wall of the same building materials of the side, or it can be done with a roof. Sometimes they have the cutaways in the roof. Mm-hmm. But just a metal screening panel around the top doesn't work.
Right. Okay.
So as we talked about above, the environmental impacts need to be quantified. That's information required for the plan. Then 9D, the fire authority, fire marshal wanted to know that their turning radii can be met. I think that's possibly going to be a little challenging with some of the streets and drives, though I suggest that it may be able to be accommodated if you've got a mountable curb or a rolled curb area, you can assume that they can go up on that to go around the corners. So you just demonstrate that you're complying with, they gave you a radius that they want you to be able to comply with. So we should have demonstration that that's so.
Are you going to use the mountable curbs? Do you know yet?
More than likely, yes.
Yeah, and we've had better luck with those here.
Yeah.
And then the township engineers had talked about detail on the timing, design, and ownership of the proposed water system. And then there's been some discussion about the potential for that being accessible with restroom facilities for park users. And, we would suggest that that could be a substantial benefit of the PUD if that were so. We just don't know at this point if that's going to be so.
And I'm personally going to defer to the board, I think, for that. I don't think that the Planning Commission can suggest that they move their water tower and all that over to the park property. That's really going to have to rest in the board's decision, and whatever group of people or a body of the whole they decide to deal with it, I would think that would be where we would go.
The question here becomes whether or not they're proposing that when we get to the review of what are the substantial benefits for this PUD.
Okay.
Whether that's one of the things being proffered as a substantial benefit or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a conversation we have with the board during this review, and then if it's something that they like the idea of, then yes, you would see that in our when we submit for final.
Okay. That makes sense.
That's number 9.
Okay.
Moving on to number 10.
It's a big one, but I don't know if there's much to talk about yet. So go ahead and hit it.
Well, so number 10 is traffic impacts, and we did have an early version of their, which I assume is still their current traffic study, which I understand. So now, as part of our review, we reached out to MDOT, to the Livingston County Road Commission, and it's not germane to this discussion, but also to the drain office. I got a call back from Mike Gorel at the Road Commission. I did not get a call back from Wendy Ramirez at MDOT. So Mike's comment was, well, we're waiting for MDOT to complete their review of the traffic study, at which time we expect to have a meeting with MDOT to discuss the traffic study with them. Beyond that, the only thing he wanted to share is his concern about the unpaved section of Pleasant Valley Road. And
tell him it's
the
his
degree to
road.
which traffic might want to go that way from this development.
Just having done these just for the public's benefit, there isn't a lot of discussion tonight. We need that traffic study, but there are significant improvements that have been identified from Mayberry Homes for turnarounds and widening and traffic signals and all sorts of things that you can imagine would happen, but it's also premature to talk about it because the two bodies that own the roads, who are going to dictate what ends up happening, haven't bothered to tell us, but we're all smart enough and have done this enough to know that there's some significant changes coming.
Well, so yeah, and so the question, that arises from reading the traffic study is that the first 4 items on there are deemed to be warranted today, and so are indicated as being by others. And so the question is, who are those others who are going to do those 4 things that are needed in order to make the project work? And beyond that, the other improvements that are warranted by the project are indicated as being accomplished by the applicant. So, that's kind of where we are with the traffic until we get some information from MDOT.
Guess we're to 11.
11 is pedestrian circulation. So they have integrated them into the development sidewalks and pathways quite well. We have some questions and comments. So the question for the Planning Commission to discuss is whether sidewalks or pathways should be extended along Pleasant Valley Road and Fenton Road as it is. And now, of course, tonight we discussed whether or not there will even be a mixed-use street entering onto Fenton Road, which would, in my estimation, change this analysis some. Fenton Road is a more difficult issue because of the outlots that exist along there. You know, they own both ends, but they don't own the middle, and the future right-of-way doesn't exist and will not exist along that middle, where the existing single-family homes are. It's not to say it's not possible to create a road or a sidewalk connection in the existing right-of-way, but I suspect there's a ditch along there that's going to make that problematic. So then the other question is with respect to Pleasant Valley, where really they are coming out at multiple points, and don't those points want to be connected so that the pedestrian ways form a complete circuit around that part of the PD. So that's 11A.
Well, I'm guessing, all right, we'll just nod heads because I know some of the Fenton Road people are here. Do you want a sidewalk in your front yard? Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah. They're going to have to shovel it then too, and they probably don't want that either. And I don't know where it would only benefit them. They could walk down to the corner if they had a sidewalk, but.
And I don't know if it's on the, I can't recall on the, because I live up Pleasant Valley, but I know on the paved portion of Pleasant Valley, there's, the road commission added like a walk lane or bicycle.
Oh, like a bike lane?
Not a true bicycle lane, but if you notice it comes off, and I don't know if it's the same way on Fenton Road.
There's nothing on Fenton right now.
No, nothing right now. It's not wide enough.
Or Pleasant Valley.
Pleasant Valley is a little bit wider than I would think is normal.
Right. But there's that line. I mean, it's not a true bicycle or sidewalk. But I don't think it's needed. I wouldn't support having a sidewalk along those properties.
Well, I definitely would not support Fenton Road. I just saw a nodding of the heads, and I would agree if I lived there. I probably am not looking
Sidewalk
forward to that.
How about the sidewalk from M59 to the first drive that would be fronting, the development on Fenton?
I guess it depends if the front drive is there.
Yeah, that's what it would depend. But if it is there, does it make sense to at least bring it along that frontage? Since it's going to be
What's happening?
regraded, redone.
Yeah, I wouldn't support it. I don't think it would ever be used.
Right now, there's no walk that even comes out that far.
Okay.
So, and some examples, though, at Walgreen, I think, has that. Between Walgreen and CVS, I think there are sidewalks, even though that would be a sidewalk to nowhere, going north on Old 23.
Yeah, but Old 23 is still, it's a different part of the township. I don't know. Unless the homes there want it to walk down to the corner, I wouldn't want the people walking up, and I wouldn't want to have to shovel it.
Well,
They've never shoveled a sidewalk in their life of living there, and now we'd make them.
And if I was one of those folks on Fenton Road, I wouldn't want it either, but I'm just looking for uniformity in the conversation.
Yeah.
Other areas we have it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so would it be proper to go, like Sue says, to that drive? Would there be people walking from that drive?
Up to the corner of 1059.
Would they? I don't
across
know.
to the new
Who would that be?
restaurants or something.
Who would that, yeah.
Is there a sidewalk at that point?
There's no.
That doesn't look like there's a sidewalk drawn there.
Get your pointer, but right now it stops at, what is that, Pocket Park?
It stops at that Pocket Park right there.
Yeah.
There is no sidewalk going out there now.
Right.
Well, that comment comes later, but of course it's all predicated upon there being a road there in the first place. But, maybe people want to bike along the bike path along M59 or whatever it is.
I guess our thoughts were that's a pretty high traffic area with all of that commercial and all of the activity going on, and do you really want,
Right, you don't want them traversing through the middle of it, but that's why you want to take them around the periphery of it.
Well, along M59 is kind of a different story probably, isn't it? Because do I see one along M59?
Yeah, M59,
right.
both sides.
That one's required.
That's not a...
And that intersection is going to be signalized, and so people will have the ability to cross at that point to the businesses on the other side of the street. So that's the point where you want to get them to, is that corner.
But if you want to bring people in that are bike riding or walking their dog or whatnot along M59 sidewalk, a walkway into your development would come into your commercial area.
Currently, it's farther to the south. I mean, I was trying to think if it would be, acceptable to have some sort of walk here, but then there's just so many turning movements here that seems like kind of a dangerous proposition to be crossing those driveways. So I was thinking, if you're on your bike, maybe just bike a little bit down, a little bit farther, and go in, at the boulevard and to where it's a nicer experience, less turning movements. You don't have to cross, driveways, and you're into a park and a plaza. And,
so at the boulevard, is there a walkway?
yeah. Right here.
There is a
Both
walkway.
sides.
Okay. Okay. Well, I know people will use that, whether they're walking or biking. They're going to use it, or running, whatnot. But whether there's a sidewalk there's a lot of obstacles, you're right. Yeah, a lot of curbs, a lot of plantings.
So what would you like? I think this started out as Pleasant Valley and Fenton Road conversation.
Well, so for purposes of north parcel, I think it's limited to that portion of Fenton Road that would be adjacent to the commercial area. Is there a reason to do that? I mean, I would say there is. People are going to want to circulate to that corner, and you don't want them going through, paralleling through the gas station parking lot. That's not the way to get there. And people will choose the shortest route if it's in any way viable.
Yeah, if you do that, then you need to put the sidewalk along the road out to Fenton Road that we're talking about possibly eliminating. You have to add the sidewalk right here and there to connect it. Correct. You have to add that L.
I guess I'm a little confused as to why you think people are going to go to that corner.
Because there's going to be a stoplight there, and they can cross there to get to the other side of the street.
But they would not be walking up and down Fenton. They would just come straight across onto the path that we're providing.
Well, the question is, how do they get to that corner? And so one way they could get there is across all those parking lots. Another way they can get there is going the wrong direction down to the boulevard and then going back. My suggestion is
get to this corner to go where?
They're not to the businesses on the other side of the street.
Well, there's a cross. We have a cross area right there.
Right, but you want to get to that crosswalk. That's what I'm saying is people are going to want to get to that crosswalk. Mm-hmm. So how are they going to get there? They got three ways to get there. The safest way, as it's drawn, would be to go down to the boulevard, take the sidewalk out to the street, take the street sidewalk down to the corner and cross. But, most people are going to try to avoid going backwards to go forwards. So they're not going to do that. They're going to, if there's no other way to go, they're going to go across the parking lots to get to the corner. If there's a sidewalk paralleling the street and then paralleling Fenton Road up to the corner, then my suggestion would be that they would take that. That would be a direct route to where they want to go.
Well, this is in the right of way as well.
Okay.
But it looks like it would hug So, I mean, I'd rather put that in there or anywhere else.
Can you use a light pencil to just kind of propose? Because we had the cursor going. I don't know if that was you using.
Yeah, I don't have a light pencil.
I have one. What are you looking for?
Laser. I just want to think
Okay, I think we're fine with putting the sidewalk along here and then connecting there. And I think that would probably work whether you had a road or not. People would probably still use that.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, what would be next, Greg?
So then on the other question is that on the south side, do you see any reason to circulate along Pleasant Valley Road as between the various connection points of the development to Pleasant Valley Road? Keeping in mind that there's a future fire station and park, and a current park that fronts on Pleasant Valley and right in the middle of that area.
Well, that hasn't been finalized.
Well, it's a proposed park. The fire station is potential, but the park is either way. That's their park.
I see all these people here coming up right here, sort of in the heart of the whole thing.
but I see people going along Pleasant Valley Road, connecting all the way to the south end. I mean, that's an option.
Well, that's wetlands down there, isn't it?
No, not always. I would probably end it at the wetlands. So can we look a little bit to the south? So maybe
Right there.
it needs to connect, exactly right. Yeah, maybe it needs to come just to that boulevard, whatever it's called, residential street right away. Maybe it just needs to come there because all these people, yeah, they're going to go this way probably, but there's those that will take the road less travel. They're going to go farther. Kids will be definitely riding their bikes in Pleasant Valley Road. Is my take on that.
Okay.
And since we're doing it, if we're going to do it on the north side of, why wouldn't we do it on the south side of M59?
Okay. Let's do that. Next, Greg.
So then 11B, we suggest that you connect the pathway system that's around the senior living facility, that portion that's not within the memory care area, out to the public pedestrian way system.
Where would that be?
Well, I would suggest that at multiple points, at either end, at least at one end. I'm not.
Maybe
Even up
One end is the memory care. I don't recall as a sitting here which end it is.
That end.
So the end the end that's not inside the fence, but the pedestrian system I think comes outside the fence. Either way, there's this point here, which it would be nice to connect out to the public street or to the street, and maybe something from this end as well. I don't feel as strongly, I guess, about it being at both ends, but I think it has to connect to the it's as though they're not welcome to walk on the sidewalks with the rest of the folks in the PD. Connect them up.
Can I comment on that? Is that
Absolutely.
I am not an assisted care living expert. However, that may be by design. Sometimes residents of a care facility are not permitted to leave that facility without the aid of a worker, and they may have designed this fenced area with that walkway so that those residents can walk in this area, and that's not being deemed to have left that facility.
Well, that's the memory care part, and so I'm not suggesting that you connect anybody out of there, because they're not. That's the reason why the fence is there, because they wander off.
Even if it's not a memory care, even if it's another assisted care facility, those can sometimes apply. Again, I'm not an expert. I don't even know.
We do have our resident expert here, so.
I'll tell you, I just did one of these in West Bloomfield, and we connected them out to the public street sidewalks.
I would think if I was a family member there with my mom or dad or a friend, I would want to walk around and get out and change the environment a little bit. And if that means it's more welcome, it's walkable.
Okay.
I certainly don't see a problem connecting that area that she's pointing to right there.
Okay.
And then maybe something on the west side there out to the path.
Or just out the front door, going, I started the walkway there, going out across to just heading north. Just go
Right
across.
there.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
Somewhere through there.
Mm-hmm.
So you acknowledge the front door, because there sometimes are some control where they watch people going in, signing in and out, so they know someone's gone, whatever.
I'm certainly not saying that's the case here.
Right.
I'm just saying that in some of these cases, that may be by design. I don't know that that is in this case, though.
We'll take a look at it.
Okay.
Let me ask the commission, we're running over our preset allotted time. We still have to cover architecture. And I guess technically we should go back and see if this qualifies the first couple pages of the review letter. Do you wish to finish this, or do you wish to come back? No, we all work.
Well, we've been here 3 hours.
Correct.
I think most of us, everyone on this, has worked all day long. I just think it's more effective to go through this very carefully.
Okay.
We owe that to the public and we've been here for 3 hours now. I'm certainly willing to stay for another hour to get through all this, but I just want to point that out.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you like to do? Would you like to bring them back on the next meeting, which is 2 weeks, or would you like to look to next week? What's your time frame?
We'd like to do it as soon as possible, so if we can call a special meeting next week, then that would certainly be our preference.
Probably not going to be 3 hours long.
No, that'd be fine with me.
I think there is going to be some time on the architecture. That's my concern, and like Larry's saying, we want to, really give you the comments fully and do our job, and I think we're going to start to take some shortcuts pretty soon here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We don't want to do
right.
that.
Are you available the 21st?
Yes.
21st?
Yeah.
21st, and we'll check with the two. So why don't we call a special meeting? Greg's nodding his head yes. Let's call a special meeting for next Thursday, the 21st at 7 o'clock. We'll pick it up right where we landed,
All right.
right where we stopped, right in the middle of pedestrian
Back on the
circulation. Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, we're trying our best to get through it.
Absolutely.
I'd agree with all the
And I
comments.
appreciate it.
Okay. So, Troy, you'll take care of all of that? Posting?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for this evening. Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's a big project. We told you it would take a while. Okay. Call to the public. Anybody tonight? You'll also have calls to the public next Thursday also. We don't want to short you that opportunity either. So you have one right now, or you'll have two of them next week. Hi there. Could
Hi.
you get your name and address again?
Nancy Redner, 2202 Wilson Lane.
Okay.
Wilson Lane is just east of this proposed development, and right next to us is Becca Lane, and then a little ways down is the church. Will the Planning Commission be looking at putting in turn lanes for our streets, or with the traffic study? Because there's going to be no way we can safely get in and out, and that includes the kids and parishioners and such, if this development goes in at the density that is proposed. Second thing, you keep referring to the previous plan development, that everything was agreed upon. That was before the recession. That was back when we had designated police presence, which we do not have anymore. I noticed that there is a fire department building planned on the site, but is the township now going to look into police protection? Not being a comment of any type of people coming in, but more the density of the facility. Right now, it's 45 minutes if you call the police to get someone out here. And with that many people living that close together, there's going to be problems. It's just the way city life is. I appreciate what you're trying to do and go through it, but I really, really ask that you take into account the residents of this side of Hartland, and the homes, the community, the space we like. And several of you have said you have not been by that location. I know one lives near there and drives by it, so knows. I don't know about the rest of you. But I would say in your planning, maybe you show up there at 7 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock at night and see what the traffic is like, see what the pedestrian, but mostly just cars. It is crazy. Depending on the sunlight is hazardous. And even if there's a light there, east of Fenton Road, there is a hill which makes it very difficult to see what's coming. And if it's in the morning, you can't see. And if it's in the evening, going the other way, the sun plays a big part. Please look at the safety of the residents in the community. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else?
Name again, or?
Yeah, probably.
Dan Olding, 2254 Fenton Road.
Yep.
I agree with what she just said wholeheartedly. And I would suggest that each one of you do your own little traffic study and go out and make a couple laps up and down M59 and the Fenton Road, Pleasant Valley intersection at the time she stated, like 7, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock at night. You may change your perspective on this whole thing.
All right, thank you.
All right. Didn't know it was 3 hours already. Thanks for stopping the meeting, by the way. Couple parting shots. I know I spoke earlier. Chris Crump again, 3104 Fenton Road. Spoke earlier about, I want to say, we call it blight or the density, and it's just not normal in a rural area for such a production of a development like this. But I want to go back, because everybody keeps referring to the 2005 or the 2007 approved plan. Everybody keeps defaulting to that. That was not built. New plan, we would like to hold it at least to the standards. We look at those areas in a rural setting, and we appreciate the discussion on the green spacing and the curtains of hopefully pine trees. I didn't see the description go to the pine trees of a good height and good growth. We don't want to see the development. We don't want to see that area change, but if we could keep it in a natural setting. I like what happened with Kentucky Fried Chicken. You really don't know it's there until you're right on top of it. I like Myers, where I can't see the parking lot from M59, way in the back. Love the deep setbacks. Love the rural feel still, even though we have large, big box stores in there. I hope that doesn't change with this development. The Avondale that was spoke about earlier, I did research that earlier this week a little bit. It is a beautiful development, small development, but it was done in an urban setting in downtown East Lansing. So that fits with the purpose of that area. Those homes are no different really than what was going on in that area anyways. So that being said, we'd like to keep the rural nature of Hartland as rural as possible, or as visibly as possible. Great discussion on eliminating that road way on Fenton Road. I hope that we stay down that path and do not put a road there. The sidewalk sounds like a wonderful idea. If we can stay away from doing a road there, I know I asked for it earlier on Pleasant Valley, but there's more, I believe, more residential homes on Fenton Road that we don't want to have to deal with any traffic entering or exiting there. That's about all I have. So appreciate the discussion today and the time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Hello.
They all took my thing. The plan of 2007 that everybody keeps talking about, I got to tell you, these are the same concerns we had back then, and it took them many years to come up to that approval, and it was approved by the former commission. No, these are the same discussions. We have the same issues. Nothing new, not against Mayberry, because you're not unique. This has been here. We've gone this route. We have concerns as those families that are facing this and are boarding up again. I don't want little trees, 10 years, really. I want to not see it. I want my yard to be fenced off or whatever you want. I want full trees. I think everybody here wants, the water. What's going to happen in 6 years when the water supply goes? Are we going to be able to find them? Is somebody else going to come up and say, hey, we're going to take care of your wells that you have to redo? These are the things that we need to know, some assurance from the community that lives here. And I appreciate all your concern. I'm hoping it doesn't go to deaf ears. Thank you.
Nope. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close call to the public. Got anything for us tonight, Troy?
Just a reminder, the joint meeting with the Township Board on the 26th at 6:30. I've handed out, we're fortunate that they're going to serve food there. You've been handed a little menu. If you get a chance, please fill that out. I'll try and pick that up and turn that in. That's it.
Okay. Any committee reports, comments, anyone? Okay, remember, next Thursday, 7 o'clock. Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Kalani and Mitchell, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you and good evening. Sorry about that.
Oh, did you have to stay? Oh.